one for local news in Ottawa and the Valley. This is City News, now on 101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
It's Thursday, January 13th. Good morning. I'm Andrew Boyle. Right now in Ottawa and in Smiths Falls, feeling a little bit colder in the wind, but in Ottawa right now, it's minus 10 degrees. Smiths Falls is minus 8. Here's what's making news in Ottawa and the Valley. Ottawa's top doctor is trying to ease parent fears about the new provincial protocol requiring fewer parents to be told about COVID-19 outbreaks in schools. Here's City News reporter Jason White.
The province will no longer require notifying parents of school COVID outbreaks until 30% of students are sick. But Ottawa's top doctor suspects word will get around before that.
Letting their close contacts know that they have turned positive, that will be some information for parents.
Dr. Vera Etches says parents should be screening their kids for COVID symptoms every day, regardless of whether there's COVID in their classroom.
The management of the situation doesn't change whether or not someone has confirmed tested positive.
She says vaccinations can be a big help in preventing COVID spread, but vaccination rates among young kids, ages 5 to 11, are still below that of teens and other age groups. Jason White, City News.
And we'll have more on this story with Tom D'Amico, Director of Education with the Ottawa Catholic School Board, on the Rob Snow Show just after 11 o'clock this morning. The federal government has shifted gears, reversing a plan to require Canadian cross-border truck drivers to be fully vaccinated against COVID. Instead, the new rule that was set to take effect on Saturday only applies to American truckers. They'll be turned away at the border unless they're inoculated. A Canada Border Service Agency spokesperson telling the Canadian press unvaccinated Canadian truck drivers or those who have had one dose of vaccine will not have to quarantine. Ontario won't be following Quebec's lead and taxing anyone who remains unvaccinated against COVID. It's according to Premier Doug Ford, who made the comment during a photo op at a vaccination clinic yesterday. He says Ontario is taking a different approach. Quebec Premier François Legault announced on Tuesday his province would impose stiff financial penalties on people who choose not to get their shot. City News Time 9:02, and now your forecast with meteorologist Jill Taylor.
We'll get into some more flurries, especially for the late afternoon into the evening. Could collect a centimeter or two. The wind today will be light and variable. The high about -5 will drop to -18 for the low, and then a lot colder again for the high for tomorrow. The high just -16, but lots of sunshine. For today, the high -5.
And right now in Ottawa, it's -10 degrees. In Smiths Falls, it's -8. City News Time 9:03. Now, the Senate is taking an additional week off before they resume their work from the winter break.
Speaker George Fury says the chamber will remain adjourned until February the 8th. Under the Senate rules, a speaker can extend an adjournment if the public interest does not require the upper house to meet. During the brief post-election parliamentary sitting that ended December 17th, the government prioritized 3 bills which were all fast-tracked. So now there are no government bills currently before the Senate. The Commons is scheduled to resume sitting January the 31st. Roger Ward, The Canadian Press.
And a flashback to the early 1960s as a top Russian official has issued a warning as tensions with NATO mount.
Russia's Deputy Foreign Minister Sergei Ryabkov told Russian media that he couldn't exclude the possibility of Russian military deployment in Cuba and Venezuela. Ryabkov led the Russian delegation in recent negotiations in Geneva. The talks failed to find a solution to Moscow's security demands amid a build-up of Russian troops near Ukraine. Ryabkov said that Russian President Vladimir Putin had warned military technical measures would be taken if the US increased pressure on Russia. I'm Karen Chamas.
And I'm Andrew Boyle for News Anytime. Follow up online at ottawa.citynews.ca.
He's got the news and the views.
He's got views on the news.
It's the Rob Snow Show on Rogers TV and City News.
101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
It's a nice enough day out there, I guess. I'm not too crazy about the weather forecast, though. Bone-chilling cold for the weekend. And then a big snowstorm on Monday. Oh, this winter. It's throwing everything it has at us. Good morning. Hey, welcome to the Rob Snow Show. On City News, we have a great show ahead for you this morning. Coming up in just a few minutes from now, it's Randall Denley, author and columnist for Post Media. He writes about city issues for the Ottawa Citizen, offers commentary on the Ford government for the National Post. New column today has a lot to say about all the latest information out of the powers that be at Queen's Park and the latest and greatest and new and improved back-to-school plans revealed yesterday by the Minister of Education, Mr. Lecce, Stephen Lecce. Stephen Lecce has long been considered a rising star in conservative circles, but I can't help but wonder if all the chaos in the education system has maybe stalled his meteoric rise. We'll get into that as well. Doug Ford, David, you have the clip of Doug Ford on the anti-vax tax. Doug Ford ruled out the anti-vax tax, Quebec style. We ain't going down that road, is what he said. The vaxi tax is what some in the Quebec media have taken to calling it, the vaxi tax. But whatever it's called, by the sounds of it, it's not coming to Ontario anytime soon. At least that's what the Premier says now. So Randall Denley on that coming up in about 10 minutes from now. We'll pick up on some of these issues with our regular Thursday panelists, Lindsay Maskell and Andrew Brander. Lindsay is a Liberal. Andrew is a Conservative. And every Thursday morning we spend some time kicking around the big issues in Ontario politics. I'll talk about how Doug Ford is trying to strike a balance, I guess you could put it, trying to strike a balance between the vaccinated and the unvaccinated and whether he's getting that right. This is what he said yesterday about the Quebec anti-vax tax.
No, we're taking a different approach. We aren't going down that road. We're going to take a different approach, but I implore, I ask, I beg every single person that's not vaccinated, please protect yourself, protect your family, protect co-workers. Please get your vaccination. That's the best way we can defend against Omicron or any of the variants.
Okay, so he's been accused of being, too soft. He's been accused of pandering to anti-vax elements in the party, in the conservative movement. I don't quite see it that way myself. He certainly took a harder line with his own caucus than Aaron O'Toole did. Doug Ford kicked people out of his caucus over their vaccination status, as I recall. You can't say the same thing for Aaron O'Toole. And we'll also talk this morning about Dr. Kieran Moore and the job he's doing. He is the province's chief medical officer of health. He was at this briefing yesterday. Dr. Moore replaced Dr. David Williams. David Williams was often accused of being a poor communicator. And all kinds of people were praising the appointment of Dr. Moore to this position, elevating him to Chief Medical Officer of Health after the job that he had done as the Chief Medical Officer of Health for the Kingston area. But now Dr. Moore is being accused of being an ineffective communicator because of this soundbite that came out of yesterday's briefing.
Have they not been mandated in schools?
So it is a new vaccine, and as a result of that, we want a greater experience with it before we'd ever mandate it. And I don't think any jurisdiction in Canada has mandated the virus to date, or the vaccine to date, I'm sorry.
Okay. Just one more time. Can you play that one more time, please?
Have they not been mandated in schools?
Hold on a sec, Dave. Sorry. He's asked, why aren't you mandating the vaccine for school children, making it part of the childhood immunization program? Why isn't it mandatory for children to get this vaccine? And again, this is what he said.
So it is a new vaccine.
It's a new vaccine. Right. It's a new vaccine. Because it's a new vaccine, in other words, it's not, proven? Or it's, experimental? So now there are calls for Dr. Moore's resignation or for Doug Ford to fire him. Why would anybody want this job anyway? We'll get into this during Ontario politics this week. On the issue of the vaccinated and the unvaccinated, And what we're going to do to people who remain unvaccinated, should they be taxed? Should they be fined? Should they be put on lockdown, never allowed to leave the house ever again? What do Canadians think about the unvaccinated, generally speaking? How do vaccinated Canadians feel about unvaccinated Canadians? I mean, there's been public opinion research on this issue. We're going to explore it this morning with the help of Christian Bourque. He's with Leger Polling. For example, from Leger, in a recent survey, more than 6 in 10 Canadians supported implementing measures specifically related to a person's vaccination status, 6 in 10, including things like having to show proof of vaccination to shop at shopping malls and all other retail stores except grocery stores. We are apparently so charitable and kind-hearted in this country that at least we don't want the unvaccinated to starve. The majority also think the unvaccinated shouldn't be allowed into government-run liquor stores or pot stores a la Quebec, or be allowed to ride public transit. And most Canadians are in favor of having separate areas in hospitals and medical clinics specifically for the unvaccinated. So basically, they should be segregated from society. That's where we are. Now, yesterday, Mr. Trudeau was asked repeatedly about this plan from Premier Legault in Quebec to tax the unvaccinated. Mr. Trudeau danced and dodged and ducked and weaved all around that question, saying only that he needs more information before he can offer an opinion. But he certainly had an opinion on Aaron O'Toole's position on the unvaccinated, that they should be accommodated. That's what Mr. O'Toole said. This is Mr. Trudeau yesterday, pivoting away from Mr. Legault over to Aaron O'Toole and the Conservatives.
The best path forward is vaccination, which is why at the federal level, the fact that there is still a debate being brought forward by the Conservative Party saying that we need to be more accommodating of people who choose not to get vaccinated is, I think, exactly the wrong thing. Mr. O'Toole is out to try and protect his own leadership, and he's not thinking about protecting the healthcare workers who are on the front lines.
Okay, so this is what I want to get into this morning when we do the Talkback Hour. We do the Talkback Hour every morning between 10 and 11 o'clock. It's an hour of opinion. It's an hour of phone calls. It's the hottest hour of talk radio in town. We have the ratings to prove it, okay? So on one side, you have, Premier like Legault talking tough about the unvaccinated, being very restrictive. Today it's the liquor store and the pot store. Tomorrow it might be all kinds of other stores. Maybe someday a curfew just for the unvaccinated, or a tax just for the unvaccinated. And then you have this position from the federal Conservative leader, Aaron O'Toole, who said, I believe he said it last week. It was last week, Dan? Yeah, okay. That we shouldn't have this hard edge about this issue. That we should try and take the temperature down a notch and reasonably accommodate the unvaccinated. We have a clip of O'Toole? Yeah, I can't hear it.
We can also have reasonable accommodations for some people that may not be vaccinated, particularly in jobs like trucking and others, where it can be accommodated without any medical risk.
Okay, so that's what I want to put to you this morning. Okay. Are you in favor of that, or do you prefer a tougher stance when it comes to unvaccinated Canadians? Yeah. Should reasonable accommodations be made for the unvaccinated? If they don't get vaccinated, they get tested. Every day, every couple of days, on a weekly basis, whatever the case might be. If they're not vaccinated, get tested, for example. That would be accommodating people who aren't vaccinated. Should we accommodate the unvaccinated? 750-1310 is our call-in line. Our talkback hour starts at 10 o'clock. It's going to be a busy morning around here, and that's the way we like it on the Rob Snow Show on City News.
The food cupboard started about 25 years ago. Again, it was a very small operation in the basement of a church. And we have been expanding to the point where we needed to have a new facility. So in discussion with the city of Ottawa and Jan Harder, the local representative here, we came to this location, which is about 2,000 square feet, located in the Walter Baker Center. We've been here for about 2 years, and it is much better. It gives us a much broader opportunity to serve our clients better. It's a fairly affluent community in Barrhaven, so you wouldn't think that people would really need to have a food bank or a food cupboard. But people sometimes have a temporary loss of their job, maybe new immigrants or refugees to the community. Maybe there's been an injury in the family or something like a pandemic that causes people to run short of food during their monthly requirements. So we offer any clients who come and live in our catchment area the opportunity to pick up an order of food every 3 or 4 weeks. The need varies from time to time. We have expanded our offering to include quite a few perishables, eggs, milk, cheese, yogurt, vegetables, fruit, but people I think know that we need cans of beans and stuff as well too. One thing that we're consistently short of sometimes is personal hygiene products. You go to the grocery store, you buy your toothpaste and you buy your deodorant and shampoo there. People don't automatically think that to donate those kinds of things to a food cupboard, so we end up buying quite a few of those things from time to time. The pandemic has affected us like it has everybody. Initially, we had to stop the grocery store food donations so that we didn't have any risk of contamination and to have a significant number of volunteer work to be done in our facility. We have a storefront, so it's like a mini grocery store where you take a cart and you go around and pick out the things that you want. That doesn't work during the pandemic to maintain social distancing and so on. So what we have now is our clients can come in one at a time, they make an appointment, they stand behind a line, and they direct our volunteer to, I'd like Kellogg's cornflakes rather than Harvest Crunch, to pick the food that they would like off the shelves according to the allocation, depending on the size of their family. And then they take it out, load it into their vehicle or whatever, bring back the cart, we disinfect everything, and prepare for the next client. We are very blessed here in Barrhaven. We're a totally volunteer organization. So if you give a dollar to us, it goes to purchasing food or to provide some service to our clients.
With Post Media columnist and author Randall Denley. Good morning, Randall. Welcome back.
Hi, Rob.
What was the challenge yesterday for the Education Minister, Stephen Lecce, and Ontario's Chief Medical Officer of Health, Dr. Kieran Moore? What did they have to do yesterday? What was the mission?
Kind of awkward for them because, Moore had said on a Friday, hey, school will reopen on a Wednesday. And then on Monday, last week, the Premier got up and said, no. Terribly, terribly dangerous. We're closing the schools. And now here we are in the next week. Time to open the schools. So they needed to explain why that made sense. There's really no way to explain why it made sense to keep them closed in the first place, but they had to be able to say, something's happened. In the last, 9 days, something has happened, and the schools, while not safe, last week, they'll be okay next week. It's kind of a steep hill to climb, really, partly because when they closed them, they didn't really offer a tremendous rationale. You remember that was a press conference where Doug Ford talked about, 100, maybe 200,000 cases a day were coming. 1,000, 2,000 people a day going into the hospital, a tsunami. So, we had to do everything possible to avoid the tsunami. Mm-hmm. Well, since then, case numbers have come down, although with the way they test now, it's hard to know what's happening broadly because they're only testing people in healthcare, high-risk settings and so forth. But, looking at the same high-risk group over the last week. The numbers have come down. They're still high. Certainly haven't seen the tsunami. So challenge is, how do we make sense out of this, if you're Lecce and more, without saying, yeah, the Premier was kind of crazy last week when he closed schools, but don't worry, the open schools forces are now in charge. So they did offer a number of arguments and things that have changed, and it's not completely inconsequential.
Okay. So at the conclusion of the news conference, if you're giving them a grade, I guess, in the education theme, how do you think they did?
I give them a B+, I think.
B+, okay, all right.
Lecce speaks very well. He's quite persuasive. He did mention and underline a number of things, new things they've done, N95 masks for teachers, 3-ply for students, rapid antigen tests for kids to take home so the parents can test them if they think there's an issue, vaccination clinics and schools, a little more weak, 3,000 additional HEPA filters. Okay, are they in schools yet? They've been shipped. All right. Okay, they're not in schools yet, so maybe you shouldn't talk about them too much. But the teachers have made a big deal out of this a couple of weeks ago. They're promising 3,000 filters. That's nothing. Terrible. So, well, okay, but there's already 70,000 in place. And every school in the province has been assessed, and 99% of them have had ventilation upgrades. So it's not like nothing is being done. It kind of goes back to the point that were schools safe last week? Probably.
Okay. So a B+ is not an A.
No.
My parents would say, well, why is it only a B+? So the
right. Oh, come on, Rob. This is tremendous. This is the best mark you've ever had.
Yeah. So there must have been some weak points. What were they?
Oh, there were a couple of things, I think, that jumped out. One was Dr. Moore was asked by a journalist, well, what about mandating the vaccine?
Yes.
Well, it's a new vaccine. I'd like to see more before we mandate. Nobody's mandated. Now, earlier in the same press conference, he enthusiastically supported vaccines, and the benefits outweigh the risks.
Yeah, again, let's play that clip. We have that soundbite here. Let's play that. He's asked, why isn't it mandatory for children to get the COVID-19 vaccine?
So it is a new vaccine, and as a result of that, we want a greater experience with it before we'd ever mandate it.
We want greater experience with it. Okay. All right. Okay.
But hey, you little guinea pigs, line up. It just didn't strike the right note, and it didn't take people long to jump on it, and rightly so, I think. It wasn't much of a sales pitch, and later in the day, the government issued a clarifying statement from Dr. Moore in which he once again praised the virtues of vaccination and so forth, which he had said in the press conference, and which would be his usual line. But that was a little disconcerting. And the other thing that people are having a hard time wrapping their heads around is the change in testing in schools and the change in reporting. It used to be that those more accurate PCR tests were available to kids and teachers in schools, so we had that kind of reporting. Okay, we've got an outbreak in this school, we're doing this, we're doing that. It was quite visible.
Yeah.
And now those tests are reserved for other people, so all they have is a rapid antigen test, which they don't track and record. So what they come up with as a proxy is absenteeism. So there's a lot of absenteeism in the school. It doesn't mean that they've all got Omicron, but probably they do, or a lot of them do, so that's the point to report. Okay, well, what's the threshold? Well, when 30% of people, students and teachers, are absent, then the schools will report to the public health unit, they'll report out to the parents and the public and so forth. I think 30%, that seems like a lot. It's a high number. I think people would be expecting to know that sooner, like maybe 10%, but not 30. And I think all this is designed to keep schools open. We're getting away from, oh my goodness, 2 kids in your cohort have tested positive, shut everything down. It's just they're going to keep on moving forward with this. Teachers are sick. We're building up a supply of retired teachers and other people who can step in. So it's the right thing to do in terms of keeping schools open and not overreacting, but people are used to something different, and now it will sound like underreacting.
Okay. So, David, let's play the clip again here of the Premier when he was asked about the vaccine tax, the anti-vax tax that they're proposing, or at least floating the idea of in Quebec from Mr. Legault. Doug Ford was asked about that yesterday. This is what he said.
I mean, no, we're taking a different approach. We aren't going down that road. We're going to take a different approach. But I implore, I ask, I beg every single person that's not vaccinated, please protect yourself, protect your family, protect coworkers. Please get your vaccination. That's the best way we can defend against Omicron or any of the variants. So
a lot of premiers have been asked about this in light of what Mr. Legault is doing. That's what Mr. Ford said. Mr. Moe said, I'm not going to do it. Mr. Kenney said he's not going to do it either. So there aren't a lot of takers. Mr. Trudeau refused to say really anything about it yesterday other than I want to see more details. But generally speaking, when it comes to say punishing the unvaccinated, what do you think about the job Doug Ford is doing here in going after the unvaccinated or restricting them or whatever the case might be?
Yeah, well, it's not so effective now because the vaccine passport is essentially useless because there's nowhere you can go with it anymore. And really, people who are even triple vaccinated have no particular extra privileges at the moment. So I don't know that there's any point in this whole discussion of trying to punish the unvaccinated and, force them so we can get, 2, 3, 4 more % vaccinated. Because we knew when we started this that we never get beyond 90. We're very close to it. There was always going to be a group of people who, for, whatever reasons, weren't going to be vaccinated. So it's not a surprise, and to try to blame everything that's happening now on the unvaccinated is irrational, in my opinion, because most of the people in the hospital are people who've been vaccinated. Now, it's right to say that the percentage of unvaccinated people who get sick is significantly higher. But, of course, there's a lot more people who are vaccinated. So we'd have a problem, even if it was 100% vaccination. Vaccinated people are transmitting this disease to other people. So it's not like vaccinated people are getting a huge payback for being vaccinated. I mean, the payback is significant in the sense that, you're less likely to get sick and die. That's kind of a big deal. But there would still be high case numbers. There'd still be a lot of hospital demand. It would be somewhat lower. There's no doubt about that. But how far are we prepared to go in pushing people to get what's really a small gain on the margin, especially when, we're being told in Ontario that, hey, this thing should peak at the end of January. So say, Mr. Unvaccinated said, I'm going to go out right now and get vaccinated, get my first dose, limited protection. Okay, well, it takes 2 weeks for that to be effective.
Right.
He's really on board now. He's going to get a second dose. That won't be effective until after, they think the peak of all this will have gone by. So whatever we have now, we have, and we have to ride it out. I think we're just distracting ourselves by picking on the unvaccinated and trying to pretend that it was all their fault. If we were all catching it from the unvaccinated, that might be an argument, but we're not.
Thank you for this morning, Randall Denley. Always great to hear from you. We'll speak next week.
Thanks, Rob.
Yeah, Randall Denley. Read him in the National Post, his column online this morning. This is the Rob Snow Show on City News.
and the Valley. This is City News, now on 101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
It's Thursday, January 13th. Good morning. I'm Andrew Boyle. Right now in Ottawa, minus 10 degrees. In Smiths Falls, minus 8. And here's what's making news this hour. With Ontario schools reopening Monday to in-class learning, the Education Minister says while all COVID cases will still be reported and the provincial website will share that data, unless there is a 30% outbreak in a particular school, parents will not be notified. A mobile vaccination clinic hitting a couple of spots locally this weekend. This is the Go Vax mobile clinic. It will be in Cornwall on Saturday, Hawkesbury on Sunday. Appointments can be booked for Cornwall starting tomorrow morning at 8. For the Hawkesbury clinic, you can book those Friday morning, starting at 8. A senior Russian diplomat has refused to rule out a Russian military deployment to Cuba and also Venezuela if tension with the United States mounts. The deputy foreign minister who led the Russian delegation in Geneva talks said in a televised remark that he would neither confirm nor exclude the possibility Russia could deploy military assets in both Cuba and Venezuela. He added that all depends on the action by the United States. City News Time, 9:32. I'm Andrew Boyle. For news anytime, follow up online at ottawa.citynews.ca.
Strong voice.
Strong opinions.
The Rob Snow Show returns on Rogers TV and City News.
101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
Oh, so much to discuss. It's Ontario politics this week. Ontario politics this week. With Lindsay, Maskell, Liberal strategist, former advisor to Premier Dalton McGuinty. Good morning, Lindsay Maskell.
Good morning, Rob.
Great to hear from you. Andrew Brander is vice president with Crestview Strategy. Welcome back, Andrew.
Hey, Rob.
It's great to hear from you. Yeah, wonderful to hear from you. So I want to start. Yes, he's over his booster hangover. That's right.
Feeling better.
That's
feeling
good.
Better
That's good. That's good. Everything's good. Lindsay, what do you think of the details announced yesterday by Mr. Lecce, the Education Minister, Dr. Moore, the latest, greatest, newest, and improved back-to-school plan from the Ford government?
Well, I'm very thankful that I don't have to make these decisions myself if I had to send a child to school back or not, because it must be very stressful for parents. It was just a continued issue of kind of creating that, an already fragile system, making it feel even worse by the fact that just sort of stating things that we just know aren't true, right? Not every classroom has a HEPA filter. The teachers and students aren't all going to have N95 masks. There are things that they just know because we know teachers, because they're active online, because those organizations have a voice. So, first of all, I absolutely think we need to get kids back into a classroom.
Okay.
I have always agreed that was supposed to be, the last thing to shut down and the first thing to open.
Yep. So
I'm glad to see that happening. But I'm just, of course, very concerned about all of the things that could have both prevented this but made it safer and easier for parents to make that easy decision to have their kids back in the classroom had we been doing this work last summer in terms of better access to testing, better air filtration, all the things we knew that would have made kids safer in their school.
Okay. Andrew Brander, what do you think about the details about the back-to-school plan from the Ford government?
Lindsay talked about the work that needed to be done and a lot of the work that has been done. Let's start off with the obvious. The return to school, obviously widely popular announcement. But when Lindsay's pointing to the things that that should have been done, think about the progress that the Ontario government has made in terms of living with and mitigating against the spread of infection in schools and measures that progress against where we were a year ago. Think back to that, right? Kids, a year ago, kids were only, were not being provided with any testing resources. Educators were at best partially vaccinated by this point. HVAC units And though I'll agree with Lindsay, there's probably still a bit more work to do on that side, but we're miles ahead of where we were last year. And kids didn't return back until well after Valentine's Day. So this year, it's really hard to look at the 1 week delay in terms of going back and find a huge amount of critics saying that this should be delayed further. In fact, most people are saying that it shouldn't have been delayed at all, and I think that's a credit to the government that has gotten the big pieces in this very complex situation right.
Okay.
I point no further than my good friend Martin Redcombe this morning, who in the Toronto Star. Of all places. Headline is Doug Ford made a lot of bad decisions. Reopening schools, not one of them. So,
well, it has been cold. It has been cold. I'm not sure if it's cold enough for hell to freeze over, but yeah.
There's your endorsement for the morning.
Right. Okay. Oh, we'll see if the progressive conservatives can use that in one of their election campaign ads that's upcoming. But I mean, a lot of seesawing, a lot of whiplash. I mean, we have one week the chief medical officer of health is facing the media alone without any politicians backing him up, saying no, schools are fine and schools are going to open, and then mere days later, you have the premier saying, no, we can't open schools. We're going to be flooded with cases, and everything is on hold until at least the 17th. Do you at least get the sense now that everyone's on the same page, the health authorities and the political leadership, Lindsay? Are they all kind of, in that same dragon boat, all rowing in the same direction?
In this exact moment in time, perhaps.
For now.
But it has been so disconnected. And, we've seen that in, the real issue through so much of this pandemic has been the communications, right? And I've always had a viewpoint that our medical officer of health should actually never be seen with political leadership because it should be separate from political direction. So those were tough days. And also it just kind of builds the issue of, even if we all agree at this moment, including the Toronto Star, and I think, it's pretty broad opinion that, we have to learn how to live with COVID, and the people that should not be suffering are kids, even though it's going to obviously drive our case numbers way up. But that's one of the risks that we need to take to have, life go on. So I do think that the disjointedness and the back and forth and all of the changes, even though, Ontarians are able to accept that these are uncertain times and that there's some difficulty, but the miscommunication has just created so much distrust and, that people aren't really believing when the government says something. Like, did we think that we were really not going to continue into January with a vaccine passport when they said it? Do we think that things are going to reopen for the rest of the public in 2 weeks? These things that we just now... all of the miscommunication plays have really built up sort of a distrust, which makes it even more difficult for a government to communicate.
What about you, Andrew? Do you get the sense that at least they're all singing from the same hymn book here?
Yeah, and I'd agree with Lindsay's point on communication. Quite frankly, I'm surprised this government came out a full week before the return date with this announcement. You always risk creating a backlash that can make you walk back or reconsider your decision, as we have seen in the past. This really helps shift the level of preparedness, and share that responsibility with school boards. And they can't really make the argument that they've been caught by surprise on anything on this. And to Lindsay's point on communications, I think this is a really encouraging sign of things to come in the next stage and the broader opening, because to the point Lindsay made, when the Premier made this announcement on schools not going back and us going back to stage 2. I think most people rolled their eyes thinking like, oh, come on, it's not going to be a week and we're not going to reopen things on the 28th. I think this is a pretty clear announcement and indication that the government realizes, at least politically, perhaps they don't have the luxury of time this go around. So what we've seen during the pandemic is, modeling largely based off what's happening in the UK, taking a cautious approach, waiting for the data to come in. I think this time they're really going to have to preempt the evidence, take that leap of faith, a bit of a gamble, and just trust in their modeling that things will follow in that direction and that things will level off.
All right. I want to talk about Mr. Lecce. Stephen Lecce is the Minister of Education. So a lot of people in the conservative movement have been watching Mr. Lecce. He's been one of those people to watch. Watch this guy. He's a rising star. Cut his teeth in the Harper PMO. He was part of my MPP panel for quite some time. I've often considered my Friday MPP panel. It's like a farm system. If you can get on that panel, you're going to go into the cabinet. It's chances. Yakabuski, okay. This is the record, okay. Yakabuski, Lecce, Pacini, right? All big cabinet ministers. Do you think it's a coincidence? I don't think it's a coincidence. Nevertheless, I'm just teasing here. He got a shot. Big portfolio. The education portfolio, education, second largest expense for the Ontario government. Big job. Big job. But he's been accused of lately being MIA, right? Quiet. Hard to get on the phone, hard to get on camera, these kinds of things. How's he doing, do you think, in this job as Minister of Education? You take that one, Lindsay, and then we'll hear from Andrew.
Well, I understand why expectations were high for Minister Lecce, especially because he was known to be a good communicator, right? Yeah, and if you think about some of the things that would make somebody a good minister, somebody who's maybe telegenic, somebody who has great communication skills, these things are these things are important in this day and age. But he's also got an issue, particularly with an education portfolio, of communicating with families, with teachers, having a group that this government did create an adversarial relationship with, whether on purpose or just not aligned with their values. So he really was walking into a hot situation. And I don't know that his strength was crisis communication. So he really has not been visible. That press conference that day where it was like he was added to the agenda and then it was moved back by 2.5 hours. There was all kinds of rumors about them trying to get him back. Was he somewhere? Like, there was just creating a lot of unnecessary news for himself by some of these odd issues, and not being out there to deliver the hard news with the premier even. So he really, would have potentially have been a little bit better suited for some other portfolios. Would be a better chance for success as a first kick at the can as a minister. This has always been a big, tough portfolio. One even Premier Wynne has taken on, and it's a tough one. But I do think that he has. Yep. I do think he has not played his hand very well in the last number of months, and particularly when we look at what going back to when, for example, the announcement about the cancellation of 413 highway, but having a plan of using that money for back to school safety. That was a turning point of not having a response, not putting as many things in place, and getting us in this situation of everybody thinks that this could have been prevented in terms of where we are with schools right now. Big news of the day, of course, is parents not going to be notified about outbreaks in their school, not being able to make those decisions for the
until absenteeism hits 30%. Until absenteeism hits 30%. At which point you might think, hey, geez, you think there might be an outbreak at the school? But on Mr. Lecce, rising star, is he falling back to earth here? Andrew, what do you think?
Yeah, no, I don't think so. I'll just expose my bias up front here. I've known Stephen for about 20 years. When I ran for president of what we call the Tiny Tories, he was actually my campaign manager. So that goes back quite a while.
The Tiny Tories.
But in all that time, finding someone describing Stephen as camera shy has never been something.
No, I know.
Has never been something I've heard until very recently. Look, from everything I've heard, from these sort of discussions on the inside. He has been the strongest advocate for students at the table. He's never been happy with decisions that involve taking kids out of the classroom. I think the Premier would find himself in the same company on that. However, it's up to the Premier ultimately to make those decisions. And so, if I think the Minister has had a clearly defined perspective on this, and he hasn't always gotten his way, quite frankly, at the cabinet table. So I think he's been an exceptionally clear communicator in terms of his expectations and his wants and needs. After this pandemic, I do think there's probably going to be a little bit of a toxic environment that might linger. In terms of his relationship with the school board. So if the Ford government is reelected, probably a good time to look at sort of shaking things up. But the confidence that this government obviously has in that minister, putting in a rookie straight into that role, clearly speaks the world of what the Premier's office thinks of him.
Okay. When we come back, the anti-vax tax. Doug Ford says, not in Ontario. When we return, Ontario politics this week on City News.
Snow Show returns on Rogers TV and City News, 101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
So, this is Doug Ford. Inevitably, he was going to be asked about, as every politician of significance was yesterday, about the plan from Premier Legault to have the vaxi tax, as some in the Quebec media are calling it, the vaxi tax, or the anti-vax tax, taxing the unvaccinated. So Premier Ford was asked about this yesterday, and this is what he said.
I mean, no, we're taking a different approach. We aren't going down that road. We're going to take a different approach, but I implore, I ask, I beg every single person that's not vaccinated, please protect yourself, protect your family, protect co-workers. Please get your vaccination.
So we're back. It's Ontario Politics This Week with the second half, and Lindsay Maskell is with us, Liberal strategist, former advisor to Premier McGuinty, and Andrew Brander, Vice President at Crestview Strategy and a former advisor to the Ford government. What do you think about the balance Mr. Ford is trying to strike here, Andrew Brander?
Well, I mean, Ford's very close with Premier Legault. For him to take a different path and try to create that distance demonstrates to me how toxic Ford knows that kind of decision would be here in the province of Ontario. From the start of this pandemic, there's been a lot of people who have tried to say a Trump is a Kenny, is a Legault, is a Ford. Mm-hmm. And what we're seeing here again is that's not the case. Because despite what the Prime Minister said about this being a mob of racist and misogynistic people who are leading the unvaccinated, the facts and the numbers here in Ontario demonstrate the exact opposite of that. It's marginalized communities, First Nations, who have had lower access and have less trust in these government programs. And Ford actually got a huge amount of support from some of these communities. So I think the Premier is demonstrating once again that he's his own leader. He knows who his constituents are. Lots of support in these communities from Etobicoke, from Markham, from Scarborough, from Brampton. And this is about, Premier Ford saying that, I'm going to continue to encourage these people to get vaccinated. But also, this coming from Legault in the first place is clearly a demonstration of how frustrating this pandemic is becoming for all our leaders who are really struggling to explain why, after promising a path out of this through vaccination, they can't deliver.
What do you think, Lindsay?
Well, Premier Legault actually has brought in a couple of interesting things. We could take something out of their playbook. For example, vaccine passport required to enter the liquor stores, for example, that saw a huge drive in increasing vaccination. But this idea that is not one of them. It should not fly. But for a very different reason, in my opinion. First of all, I don't think we should be doing things that would cause mistrust, disfaith in our healthcare system, particularly with the amount of anxiety people must be feeling with capacity limits and ambulance availability. We need to say this is a public system that's here for everybody. I was joking, I'm a very accident prone person, so an active user of our hospital system, and should I be taxed more? There is
yes you should be. Yes, you should be. You're going to have the Maskell tax. The Maskell tax.
If you keep breaking things, you have to
Lindsay,
pay more.
Sorry. You're becoming a burden to the rest of us, Lindsay. So
I'm very concerned about what that could mean and the things that governments could get away with during a time of uncertainty during a pandemic, and the lack of faith that could cause in our system. We're underspending on healthcare compared to other jurisdictions in Canada. Here in Ontario, we need to be investing more, and we need to be building faith in that system. Do we need to do something to get the unvaccinated vaccinated? Absolutely. But I don't think that this is the route, because if you are, as a free-thinking Canadian, you should realize that this kind of targeting, even though you completely disagree with these people, like I look at the numbers every day and then look at how many of these people are unvaccinated and just am so upset about it, about the people that are not getting procedures and treatments they need because of unvaccinated people occupying hospital space. But at the same time, I also realize that if this was a different scenario, the values and the principles of our healthcare system need to stand even through a pandemic. So this was the right move for Premier Ford to disagree with this. I think it goes very much about Canadian values, and I think we all know that Quebec has the ability a bit more to go to the beat of their own drum. But I think it's a pretty dangerous conversation, actually. But I do think we should look at some of the measures people have done to increase vaccination rates in some of those target groups that have been under vaccinated, and a lot of them are people that they don't think that they're at very high risk, kind of lower mobility, and there are some places that make sense to increase the availability to access, but healthcare is not one of them.
Okay. Hey, that's our time. Wow, it flies by. What a busy week. My gosh. And there's still one more day to go. I wish you all the best. Great health. And thanks so much, and we'll talk next week, okay? Stay safe.
Thanks, Rob. Have a great
week. Bye-bye. Andrew Brander is vice president at Crestview Strategies, and Lindsay has her own firm. She is of the Liberal persuasion and was an advisor to former Premier Dalton McGuinty. That's Ontario politics this week. So yesterday it was a busy hour. We were asking you, should we tax the unvaccinated, given the proposal out of Quebec? Today and this morning, during the talkback hour, which starts right after the 10 o'clock news at 750-1310, should we reasonably accommodate the unvaccinated? Your calls after the news. This is City News.
Number one for local news in Ottawa and the Valley. This is City News, now on 101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
It's Thursday, January 13th. Good morning. I'm Andrew Boyle. Right now in Ottawa, minus 10 degrees. In Smiths Falls, it's minus 8. Here's what's making news in Ottawa and the Valley. Will your grocery shelves be filled as usual? Only some truck drivers are going to be stopped at the border starting on Saturday and refused entry into Canada if they are not vaccinated. Here's City News reporter Carl Hansky.
Drivers at this rest stop like Roger feel the federal government really had no choice but to back down on its vaccine mandate for truckers.
I think if they didn't, there would be a lot of problems at the border and a lot of freight, and that wouldn't get through.
Canadian truck drivers who are unvaccinated or who have received only one dose will not have to quarantine. It's seen as a move to protect already strained supply chains, but not every truck driver I've spoken to is in favor of the exemption.
I think Canadian truck drivers should be getting vaccinated as well. I think it's a responsibility that we should all be taking.
Only unvaccinated Canadian truck drivers will still be allowed entry. Unvaccinated American truck drivers will be turned away at the border starting Saturday. Carl Hansky, City News.
City News time, 10:01. Now your forecast with meteorologist Jill Taylor.
We'll get into some more flurries, especially for the late afternoon into the evening. Could collect a centimeter or two. The wind today will be light and variable. The high about -5 will drop to -18 for the low, and then a lot colder again for the high for tomorrow. The high just -16, but lots of sunshine. For today, the high -5.
And right now in Ottawa, -10. In Smiths Falls, it's -8. The province's rule changes that would see fewer parents told when there is COVID-19 in a school, sparking a bit of anxiety in a lot of people. Ottawa's Chief Medical Officer of Health is trying to allay those fears. Here's City News reporter Jason White.
Under this new provincial directive, parents would only be notified about a COVID-19 outbreak in a school once 30% of a student body is absent.
People are being asked to notify their close contacts if they test positive for COVID.
Dr. Vera Etches, Ottawa's Medical Officer of Health, says either way, the protocol is the same, regardless of whether a student gets a positive COVID test result.
The actions that people in that classroom should still be taking is every day before they go to school to monitor for symptoms.
She says vaccinations can help prevent the spread of COVID-19 in schools, but notes that vaccination rates among kids ages 5 to 11 have been lagging behind other groups of the population. Jason White, City News.
City News time, 10:03. A mobile vaccination clinic against COVID-19 making a couple of stops in our region. Eastern Ontario Health Unit says the Go Vax clinic will stop in Cornwall Saturday, Hawkesbury on Sunday. You can book a spot for the first, second, or booster shot through the provincial booking system. Starting tomorrow morning at 8 o'clock, that's for the Cornwall Clinic. That will be held Saturday at the Civic Complex between 1 and 7. Now, booking for the Hawkesbury shot will be at the Sportsplex on Saturday for the clinic Sunday from 11 in the morning until 5 in the afternoon. Russia is sharply raising the stakes in a showdown with the West over Ukraine. A top Russian diplomat warning that Moscow would consider deploying troops to places like Cuba and Venezuela unless the tensions with NATO are decreased. City News time, 10:03. The 50-50 draw in support of the Snowsuit Fund in Ottawa has topped $250,000 now to the winner. As it stands, a winning ticket will take home $258,000. The draw is going to be held tomorrow, so just one day left to buy your tickets. They start at $10 for 5 numbers. You can pick up tickets at the Snowsuit Fund 5050.com. I'm Andrew Boyle for News Anytime. Follow up online at ottawa.citynews.ca.
It's time to talk back
on The Rob Snow Show.
Have your say and call now.
613-750-1310.
Should we accommodate the unvaccinated? Reasonable accommodation. If someone refuses to be vaccinated, should they be accommodated through things like testing, for example? 750-1310, 750-1310, 613-750-1310. Should we accommodate the unvaccinated? That is the position of the leader of the opposition, the Conservative leader, Aaron O'Toole. This is what he has said recently about reasonable accommodation for the unvaccinated.
We can also have reasonable accommodations for some people that may not be vaccinated, particularly in jobs like trucking and others, where it can be accommodated without any medical risk.
Mr. Trudeau brought that up yesterday, saying, one more reason why you can't trust the Conservatives.
Quite frankly, on the Conservative side, trying to pretend that rapid testing or testing in general is as good as getting vaccinated is simply irresponsible. Mr. O'Toole is more focused on appeasing the anti-vaxxers within his own caucus than he is on protecting Canadians, and certainly than on supporting frontline workers. If Mr. O'Toole was serious about being a leader to get Canadians through this pandemic, he would start by making sure that all of his MPs get vaccinated.
Okay, so that's the politics of it. Okay, so yesterday it was a busy hour. We were asking, should we tax the unvaccinated, given the proposal out of Quebec? And that idea, taxing the unvaccinated, had a few supporters, but only a few. The overwhelming opinion was that's a bad idea, and Premier Legault shouldn't be doing that. So today we're asking a different question, albeit along the same lines. Should we accommodate the unvaccinated? Reasonable accommodation. Should reasonable accommodations be made for the unvaccinated? I want to ask you that first because I want to see how it compares with yesterday's reaction to the anti-vax tax or the vaxi tax. The Quebec media, some in the Quebec media are calling it the vaxi tax. Vaxi tax. I quite like that, actually. Vaxi tax. I want to ask you this because it is the position of the Conservative Party leader, Aaron O'Toole. He's on tape, we just played it, saying there should be reasonable accommodations made for the unvaccinated. It's his opinion that they shouldn't be, segregated, ostracized, but accommodated. That if we took less of a hardline approach, those that remain unvaccinated, maybe some of them would reconsider. They might not dig in so much with their opposition. And he contends that there are other measures that can be used to accommodate people, namely testing. Testing people every day or every few days, whatever the case might be. Well, I want to know what you think about that position. Should we accommodate the unvaccinated? Yes, no, why not? 750-1310, 750-1310, 613-750-1310 to the phones for the Talkback Hour. Jason in Barhaven, should we accommodate the unvaccinated?
Well, good morning, Rob.
Morning, yeah.
See, I think this is where I'm having a problem. I think that they can be accommodated. Yeah. I think that, okay, so I just read for the first time in the mainstream media about the hospitalizations. It was in the Ottawa It said 46% of hospitalizations were people that came in for other reasons from COVID, right? So right. I think it's fair to assume that the ICU is similar. Like, I think...
Well, there was a number, it was about 11% for ICU admissions.
Okay, yeah, but either way, okay, so they're saying 50% of ICUs are being taken up by the unvaccinated. Well, in Ottawa, that's what, like 3 people? It's a city of 1 million people. Mm-hmm. I think that these politicians have been scapegoating,
scapegoating the unvaccinated.
Yeah, to deflect blame from the terrible situation in the healthcare system.
Fair enough.
I'm really worried about, Rob. I read an article on CTV News about how Dr. Moore came out and they asked him about mandatory vaccinations for kids, and he said something about how there wasn't enough data, and because there wasn't enough data, and the progressives in the media went nuts, saying, "Oh, you're fueling vaccine hesitancy." And well, he's a doctor, and that was his opinion. You know what I mean? And then he walked it back. That's not a good thing.
Okay.
And you know what I mean? The public opinion. Think about why the public opinion is the way it is. I would argue that a lot of it is based on. I mean, at the time they may have thought the information was right, but it's been proven now that it's hard. I mean, think of Rachel Maddow back in June was saying,
I don't. You're jumping all over the place. I don't want to wander too off the path. I take your point on Dr. Moore and the confusion that he created yesterday. We have the soundbite of Dr. Moore where he was asked yesterday by a news reporter, why aren't you mandating the vaccine for school children? If you go to school, you're supposed to have all of these vaccines, and there's a long list of them, right? Why not the COVID-19 vaccine? And this is what he said.
So it is a new vaccine, and as a result of that, we want a greater experience with it before we'd ever mandate it.
Yeah, and the caller is right. There were calls for his resignation, that if he didn't clarify what he meant, he should resign. The Stephen Del Duca, the Liberal leader, said that. So what did he do? He issued a clarification that said, quote, I want to be clear that the pediatric Pfizer vaccine for children 5 to 11 is safe, effective, and provides strong protection against COVID-19 and variants. To date, millions of children aged 5 to 11 have received the pediatric Pfizer vaccine and are benefiting from the strong protection provided, and the overwhelming majority of side effects have been mild. I strongly encourage all children 5 to 11 to get the vaccine as soon as possible. So there you go. That's not my question for you. And I think we've adequately covered that side of the story so far this morning. My question is, should we accommodate people who are unvaccinated? You have premiers like Premier Legault wants to slap a tax on them. On the other side, you have the Conservative leader at the federal level, the leader of the opposition, a man who would be prime minister, says they should be accommodated. Do you think we should accommodate the unvaccinated? Steve, Ottawa, should we accommodate the unvaccinated, make accommodations for them, like testing, for example? Steve, what do you think?
I think we already have.
We already have.
They want
Okay.
more, if they want more accommodations, I think that's being a little unrealistic.
Okay.
I mean, at this point, and small correction here, vaccines for measles, mumps, it's not mandated to have those to go to school. You can go and petition through the school boards, through Ottawa, the Ottawa health facilities, for you not to have those vaccines to go to school.
Well, yeah. It's mandated unless you get an exemption, right?
But
you
no,
need an
it's not even
exemption,
that.
right?
It's no. In the point of fact, it's not mandated at all. I work in the school boards, and I deal with this on a daily basis, where I'm trying to advocate for people to get vaccinated. I like to see people get vaccinated because it means everybody's staying safe, but it's not mandated. Anyways, but if they're looking for further accommodations,
So that's accurate. But all right, go ahead, Steve. Sorry.
No, it's fine. It's a different discussion. I don't want to jump off from the other point here.
Right. Should we accommodate the unvaccinated?
We already have.
We already have.
Okay. Yeah, we already have. And this is the thing. If people are looking for more accommodations, it's unrealistic because we already are. If they don't want to be vaccinated, they don't have to be. You can go to online school. You can order online at grocery stores. It's 2022. We have enough technical advantages around us that if people don't want to get vaccinated, okay, fine.
Are you, then let me rephrase the question just for you, Steve.
Yeah.
Do you approve of these accommodations that we have made for the vaccinated?
Well, I mean, it's not making any profit for us, right? We basically
We're not making any profit. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, you're hard to nail down, Steve.
Well, I mean, let's face it. We've fulfilled the definition of insanity 4 times now.
Okay.
By doing the same thing over and over and over again, expecting a different
Then
result.
should we be tougher on them then, Steve? Tougher on them.
I feel like I mean, the reality is, if we're worried about people that are unvaccinated bogging down our healthcare system and just destroying the healthcare professionals' mental and physical health, then yeah, we should be tougher on them because let's face it, they have options around them that can prevent this from happening and getting worse for them, right? There's nothing to say that people can't do things online if they're trying to avoid getting contaminated by COVID. And I say contaminated by COVID because let's face it, we've all gotten it at this point. It's either you're asymptomatic or not. We're going to be living this for the rest of our lives. Let's just get on the track to return to normal and figure out what that takes. If it means that if you're unvaccinated and we want you to stay out of the hospital, you have to do everything online.
Okay. Thank you, Steve.
Okay.
Thank you, Steve. Thank you. All right, 10:15. Wow, already. Should we accommodate the unvaccinated? 750-1310, Rob Snow Show. Talkback Hour. This is City News.
Papa Jack was started 14 years ago, really by accident more than anything. A friend of mine had bought a grocery store. A popcorn machine was in there. He didn't want it. I ended up by buying it. My family thought I was nuts. When I first said, come and pick up this popcorn machine, my son said, what the heck for? I won't use the exact words. But anyway, we started, and it just kept on growing and growing. But at the time, I was the only one selling popcorn in Ottawa. But we persevered as a family, and here we are. So it's been very, very rewarding for my family and myself, and to see our brand name Papa Jack. And Papa Jack came out of, I wanted something that was going to be very bilingual. So Papa, and then in Ontario everybody called me Jack, even though my name is Jacques. In Quebec it's fine, it's Jacques, but in Ontario it was always Jack. So we married the two together, Papa, Jack. With the store that we have on Thurston Drive, it basically, the factory's in the back. If you come into the store, you can see how the popcorn is being made during the week. So it adds an extra layer of, you can see the sanitation, you can see how we do it. It's not like making popcorn. Most people thought when I started this, I was making popcorn in my garage or in my basement. No, never did. It was started in this building, in the back of the building, and then we kept growing and growing until what we have now. My daughter and my son came up with a brilliant idea to do a fundraiser online. So basically all people have to do is to register here, and we give them a special code number. And with that code number, they tell their friends or their neighbors, everybody, to buy online from us with that code number. And then at the end of each period, could be 2 weeks, could be a month, then we'll pay them a 20% of all the businesses that we got through that code number. One thing I'd like to say is thank you to all the Ottawa people who have supported us and support local businesses. It sometimes people, you know, they talk about buying locally. Now it becomes that much more important to buy locally, to support your local businesses, because not too many of them are going to survive this. We're fortunate that we're so far so good.
Talk back.
Hello. On the Rob Snow Show. The phone lines are open at 613-750-1310.
Now, the Rob Snow Show continues.
Should we accommodate the unvaccinated? Reasonable accommodation is what Mr. O'Toole calls it. Reasonable accommodation. I mean, there are already many restrictions on unvaccinated Canadians, you know, mainly having to do with employment and mobility. I mean, so many employers, so many companies, the government, organizations, they've told their workers you can't work here unless you're vaccinated, right? And for some, exceptions are made. Testing regimes are in place. Workers have to be tested every so often. On the mobility side, I mean, think about this, the long list of restrictions because of the so-called vaccine passport. I mean, can't eat in a restaurant, go to a movie theater in Quebec, go to a liquor store, the pot store. But the unvaccinated are shut out of anywhere you need to show a vaccine passport. Lots of restrictions in place. Punitive measures for the unvaccinated. I think what prompted the Conservative leader to say what he said was the issue with cross-border trucking. That was really an issue that they, clearly they were being lobbied on that. And the idea that tens of thousands of truck drivers would be out of commission because of the planned vaccine mandate for truckers in Canada. The Conservatives were pushing that issue, and that's what prompted the leader to call for this reasonable accommodation. And certainly there was blowback for O'Toole on that. And there were accusations, oh, you're pandering to the anti-vaxxers, you're pandering to the Mad Max crowd. You're pandering because your leadership is in such a tenuous position right now. You need all the support you can get, so you're pandering to the anti-vaxxers. You know, those have been the accusations. We just played a clip of you of the Prime Minister saying as much. And at the same time, what happened last night? The Trudeau government totally flip-flops and backs down and reverses course on the vaccine mandate for cross-border truckers because of the very real concerns about what it would do to the supply chain. Flip-flopped and basically did what? Adopted O'Toole's position, which is reasonable accommodation. But over to you. I just wanted to give it kind of some political context about where we are right now. Bill in Pakenham. Good morning, Bill.
Well, good morning, Rob.
Should we accommodate unvaccinated people?
Well, Well, of course we should, but thanks for taking the wind out of my sails, because I was going to tell you exactly about the cross-border truck drivers. I mean, the 108,000 drivers were going to basically walk off the job because they had until the 15th of January to be vaccinated. And we only have roughly a 3-day supply of food in warehousing and in stores in this country. And so what do you think it was going to do? All of a sudden, the unvaccinated truck driver is your best friend. So, I mean, we're all taxpayers. We've all contributed to this society for umpteen years. No matter how old you are, if you've been working and contributing. So there has to be reasonable accommodation, because I think in the end, when the dust all settles, there's going to be a lot of finger pointing.
Okay. I'm sorry for taking the wind out of your sails, Bill.
Well, I'll let you go this time.
Lots of wind to go around.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Bill. Thank you, in Pakenham. Serena in Ottawa, you're on City News. Serena.
Yeah, sorry, I'm not in the best area. I don't know if you can hear me.
Hear you just fine, Serena. Should we make accommodations for unvaccinated Canadians?
I'm going to say yes, and my reason for that, Rob, is we've been here all our lives, and it's a free country. And when it gets down to it, I worked. I'll be very general. I'm a UCP, so I'm a mix of a nurse and a PSW, and I do home care. So I keep people out of the hospital as best as I can, with the agency, and I've been doing this for 10 years, over 10 years.
Okay.
And I've always been totally pro-choice and been for advocacy for patients and clients and all that. And now I've just been notified that because I'm not vaccinated, I will be losing or getting laid off at the end of the month for this. So I think that I get called on my days off, and even when I'm working my 12-hour days, there's still 20 to 100 people that won't be getting any services that day. So I think we're just heading into a huge public health meltdown by the way we're going right now.
Okay. Thank you, Serena. Thank you for your call. Kate in Ottawa, you're on City News. Kate.
Hi. I don't even know where to start.
I know, Kate.
I know. I'm wondering what the long-term effects of the mRNA vaccine are, because we have never had an mRNA vaccine before. I believe that is probably what the health minister was talking about. But because the media refuses to discuss those issues and want to push a vaccine that doesn't protect anybody except for the person who gets it, it's infuriating.
What do you mean it doesn't protect anyone except the person who gets it? What do you mean?
Because you got your AstraZeneca, which that's a whole other thing, but you got your vaccine.
You're not really answering the question, Kate. Come on, let's get to answering the question.
I'm answering it.
All right.
The vaccine protects you. How does it protect anybody else? You still can pass the virus on.
Right.
Your viral load is still the same. Your symptoms are just lower. So to allow just vaccinated people to go, travel for one. Why, if we're stopping people who are unvaccinated from traveling, how are we getting viruses from other countries? If restaurants are the issue and we've stopped the unvaccinated from going to a restaurant, then how is it that this is still passing along and restaurants need to be shut down and restaurants are part of the issue? I got vaccinated just so I could live, because I feel like we're in a communist country.
I know. I remember when you told me that now I've got to go get vaccinated. I know. I'm very familiar with your calls.
Right. It's my body. And we have people that are asking our children to be injected with something that has no long-term effects. I'm not going to have other children. That's fine. But people have to ask themselves, what are we going to do if and when issues arise from these Pfizer vaccines? Because I've heard people such as yourself, they trust the science. Well, you should look at the science from Pfizer. They have millions upon millions of dollars that they have been sued over because of their science. We have a right. We have a right to protect our children and to protect ourselves, and it's being taken away.
Okay, Kate. Okay, you're very fired up today.
Exactly.
I appreciate the passion.
2 years.
Okay, don't yell at me, Kate. Don't yell at me. Don't yell at me. Okay? I'll tolerate a lot of things, but I won't tolerate people just yelling at me. I don't deserve to be yelled at. I'm just trying to negotiate a discussion here. Don't yell at me. Stephen in Ottawa. Good morning, Stephen.
Good morning. How you doing
I'm
today?
fine, sir. Thank you. Should we accommodate the unvaccinated?
I think we've accommodated these people for as long as we could.
Okay.
There's a shortage with these rapid tests that people are lining up, at 4 o'clock in the morning to get the load to these tests. And the PCR tests, they're only accommodating, frontline workers, which is, I can understand that.
Okay.
So how could we accommodate these people anymore if they have no access to PCR tests or the other? It's kind of ridiculous to me. Okay. And I'm surprised that the leader of the opposition, of the PC party, said, well, we should accommodate all these people with.
So you'd say no. You'd say no. We've been accommodating enough already.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Stephen. Thank you, sir. Yeah. Bye-bye.
Take care.
Yep.
Bye-bye.
Yep. Pete in Nepean. Nepean, a wonderful place to be in. Good morning, Pete.
Morning.
Should we accommodate the unvaccinated? Reasonable accommodation?
Yes.
Yes.
And the reason I say that is I'm a numbers fella.
All right.
So last week when CDOH and CBC and everybody was going on, oh my God, there's 1,200 people in hospital and it's going to crap up to 2,000. I looked at how many people live in Ontario. It's over 15 million.
It's 14.7, yeah.
Yeah, so we had
which is less
1,200 people in the hospital, and you can't even guarantee that they were all COVID. They were reported as COVID, so we had...
Well, some are in with COVID, and some are there for COVID, which those are two different things, right? Yeah.
Okay, still, we had 1,200, and they were going on these news channels as if the goddamn world was ending.
Yeah.
It's less than point.
Well, now it's 1,200. Now it's 3,600.
Again, though, I do not know one person who has taken this new quick test there and has not tested positive.
Okay, yeah.
So it's, what the hell is happening? Like, how can somebody who is 100% healthy, literally, and no sign of anything, yet every single person is, oh yeah, you got COVID now. So they're ramping up numbers again, and for what reason? Like, what are they trying to solve with this? Because the numbers aren't there. Currently, we're going on 3 years, and just over 5 million have died.
So why does this back up your position that we should accommodate people who are unvaccinated then?
Well, because there's nowhere near enough in the hospital. Yet you take care of people who are obese. You take care of people who are lazy. You take care of people. A hospital is not for healthy people. So now what you're doing is you're saying, oh, just because it's COVID and just because we're vamping up numbers and everything, we shouldn't have to do anything for you. Well, I'm a healthy person. Why should I pay for an obese person who doesn't exercise to be in the hospital?
Okay, all right.
Or a diabetic person, because they don't eat properly or they don't exercise.
So should we tax them too? Should we have a fat tax?
If you're going to tax COVID, tax everyone. We're already taxed to the hill, right? Like, you got to work half
that's kind of what I thought, yeah. All right, Pete, I got you, buddy. Thank you. Okay. 750-1310. It's a wild one this morning. Talkback hour, reasonable accommodation for the unvaccinated. Your opinion, please. 2 lines available at 750-1310 on City News.
for local news in Ottawa and the Valley. This is City News, now on 101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
It's Thursday, January 13th. Good morning. I'm Andrew Boyle. Right now in Ottawa, minus 10 degrees. In Smiths Falls, minus 8. Here's what's making news this hour. Latest COVID numbers in Ontario show 500 people currently in ICUs. That is actually down by 5 from yesterday. 3,630 people, though, are in hospital with the virus. In Ontario, another 35 deaths have been recorded as well. Latest testing shows just over 9,900 new cases. 494 of them are in Ottawa, 220 in Eastern Ontario, 56 in Leeds, Grenville, Lanark, 35 in Renfrew. A sign health experts have used through the pandemic to measure the rate of COVID is to look and examine the wastewater. That is showing we may be peaking in Ottawa, but the city's top doctor, Vera Etches, says it is a good sign, but it can't be called a trend just yet because of the short period of time since levels began slightly decreasing. A mobile vaccination clinic against COVID is making a couple of stops in the region. Eastern Ontario Health Unit says the Go Vax clinic will stop in Cornwall Saturday, Hawkesbury Sunday. Bookings for each, with no walk-ins, will be the day before, starting at 8 on the provincial booking site. Ottawa's Rachel Holman is going to the Olympics after all. She and John Morris have been selected as Canada's representatives in mixed curling. That was an event won at the last Games by Morris and partner Caitlin Laws. But she and the rest of her team, skipped by Manitoba's Jennifer Jones, are already at the Games, representing Canada in women's curling. City News Time, 10:33. I'm Andrew Boyle. For News Anytime, follow up online at ottawa.citynews.ca.
It's time to talk back
on the Rob Snow Show.
Have your say and call now.
613-750-1310.
Should we accommodate the unvaccinated? Should we accommodate the unvaccinated? That's the position of Erin O'Toole, prompting this attack yesterday from Prime Minister Trudeau.
Quite frankly, on the Conservative side, trying to pretend that rapid testing or testing in general is as good as getting vaccinated is simply irresponsible. Mr. O'Toole is more focused on appeasing the anti-vaxxers within his own caucus than he is on protecting Canadians, and certainly
right. Okay. So you get the idea. But the idea of reasonable accommodation for the unvaccinated, it's a very important discussion to have, because I think it's something that is going to come up a lot when these measures are inevitably challenged in the courts, especially when they're challenged on charter grounds, that whatever it is. We had Duclos last week, the federal health minister, saying mandatory vaccination for everyone. Why aren't the provinces doing that? Legault saying tax the unvaccinated. If it's unreasonable and there are reasonable alternatives, well, then the government might be on thin ice when it comes before a court. You could certainly see how a vaccine mandate for the general public or a tax on the unvaccinated could violate a whole bunch of charter rights, right? Freedom of conscience, religion, thought, belief, expression, opinion, life, liberty, and security of the person. All of them. All of them. Ordering people to get vaccinated or face a fine or a tax only for the unvaccinated, it kind of flies in the face of all those fundamental freedoms. But even though those rights are called fundamental freedoms, like they can never be taken away from you, they can be taken away from you. It doesn't mean they're absolute. The government has in the Constitution what I would call out clauses. First of all, you have Section 1 of the Charter, and you have the notwithstanding clause, Section 33 of the Charter. If a government can go before a judge and actually make the case that your rights should be violated in the interest of fundamental justice, then it can be like those rights don't exist at all. And we have been here before throughout this pandemic. These days it's mandatory vaccinations for everyone and taxes on the unvaccinated. But we've been here before with things like travel bans and border restrictions, lockdowns and curfews, all kinds of things that conflict, you would think, with charter rights. And if a government, any government, is going to say, well, you must do this or you can't do that, and on the face of it, it looks like an obvious violation of a charter right, then the government has to make a compelling case before a judge as to why it feels justified in doing that, despite what it says in the charter. It would have the opportunity to demonstrate, keyword, in a court of law, that what it wants to do is a reasonable, there's that word, reasonable infringement of a charter right. And there's a burden that the government has to meet, and it's called the Oakes test. Because it says right in our Charter of Rights and Freedoms, right off the top, that our freedoms are not absolute. Quote from Section 1 of the Charter. The Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms guarantees the rights and freedoms set out in it, subject only to such reasonable limits prescribed by law as can be demonstrably justified. In a free and democratic society, reasonable limits, demonstrably justified. And in order to convince a judge to sign off on it, the government has to pass a test called the Oakes test. It has to prove that what it's trying to accomplish is pressing and substantial, proportional, rational, reasonable accommodation. It's a key discussion to have because I think a lot of lawyers are going to be having it soon enough. Brian in Carleton Place. Brian, good morning. You're on City News.
Hey, Rob.
Should we accommodate the unvaccinated?
Well, who said this? A Canadian is a Canadian is a Canadian.
Well, the Prime Minister said that. Yeah.
Exactly. And
right.
Now the most divisive Prime Minister in Canada has now done another flip-flop. Obviously, Canadian is a Canadian is a Canadian is not a Canadian. It depends if you are the type of Canadian who will vote for him or you are the type of Canadian who will not vote for him. And then you're vilified. I mean, I got vaccinated. My whole family is vaccinated. I got 3 vaccinations. Okay?
Yep.
But if you don't want to get a vaccination for whatever reason, we do live in a free country for the moment. Okay?
Okay.
That should be, that should be your choice.
Should be your choice.
I mean,
okay. Yeah.
It should be. I mean,
right. Well, it is a choice. It is a choice. It is a choice. But I guess what I want to get at is, what if someone chooses not to? What happens to that person? Should they be ostracized, segregated from society, locked away, never let out until the pandemic is over, or should we accommodate them?
Well, we have to accommodate.
We have to accommodate them. Okay.
They have the same rights and privileges as we do.
Yeah.
Okay, and they also pay taxes. So if you're not paying, if you're paying
rights, privileges, but what about responsibilities, Brian? Don't they have the same responsibilities, right?
Yes, they do have to have responsibilities. That is a very good point. However, we got to prove that these people are a danger to society, and nobody has done that yet. If they are a danger, if they're truly a danger to society, like criminals, okay, then fine. But nobody has actually...
Okay, but what if they're more... What if an unvaccinated person is more likely than what if an unvaccinated person is more likely to end up in the hospital than a vaccinated person? And therefore, that unvaccinated person is taking up a bed that should really be going to a cardiac patient or a cancer patient or whatever the case might be.
Absolutely, but what if somebody else mentioned, somebody with an unhealthy lifestyle, they smoke, they drink, they don't exercise, they indulge in extreme sports, okay? They're more likely to end up in a hospital too. Do we tax them? Do we limit their freedoms? Do we limit their ability to do what they want to do?
Very good.
Like somebody wants to go skydiving. I think that who in his right mind would jump out of a perfectly sound aircraft? But do we say to this person, well, you can't go to the grocery store because you jump out of your hands, or you can't go to the hospital because you've done something stupid?
Well, you're going to have to pay. You're going to have to pay the stupid tax, the skydiver tax, or whatever, right?
Yeah. Okay. Where does it stop?
Well, isn't that it, right? Isn't that it? You know, today it's let's tax the unvaccinated. Well, okay, what is it tomorrow?
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Brian. You've made some excellent points, sir. You've made some excellent points, and I have enjoyed our debate, but it's time to move along. Ron in Barrhaven. Good morning, Ron. You're on City News, Ron.
Good morning, sir.
Yep. Should we accommodate the unvaccinated?
Well, you know, we already are, in a sense. I mean, it's, you know, people are worried about the vaccine. Not many, but some people are actually worried about this vaccine. And I sent David a link about, the CEO of Pfizer, Moderna testified before Congress. I don't know if you saw that.
No, I didn't see that. No.
Okay. And his words were, the vaccines offer little to no protection currently, but with a booster, chances are I'm paraphrasing, I'm sorry, but chances are with a booster, it'll help a bit more.
Okay, all right.
And we're seeing that Omicron is just kicking everybody's butt. I'm not hearing a lot about natural immunity. I think that's a mistake we made, that we never, ever talked about natural immunity as the EU does, UK, Israel, and many other nations. I think a lot of this.
How would you prove that you have natural immunity? How would you prove something like
serology,
that?
A simple serology test.
A serology test. Okay.
Yeah, it's a 2-day thing. I paid for my own. I wanted to know. And a serology test, I paid $70. I think other people have called in and said they paid actually more than that. But if you've got natural immunity, it's the same thing as being vaccinated. And we're going through a lot of problems here because we don't want to recognize natural immunity. People that had COVID are now just as protected, if not more so, than people vaccinated. 40 international studies, Rob. It's not Ron making this up. This is 40 international peer-reviewed studies.
And have you read them? You've read them and you fully understand them?
I read the Israeli and the NHS one.
Okay, all right. Okay.
That's the only two I've actually... Look, when NHS and Israel agree on something, I'm going to believe them.
Right.
You know, they're not fly-by-night, nothing. John Hopkins says the same thing. So does Mayo Clinic, Cedar Sinai. You know, I think we can get out of this.
Gotcha, Ron. Gotcha. Got to run. Thank you. Steve, Westboro, you're on City News. Steve.
What do I think?
What do you think, Steve? Should we accommodate the unvaccinated?
Definitely not.
Definitely not. I knew you're always a hardliner on everything, Steve.
Because the reason why is because these people are calling in and they're saying, "Oh, diabetes and all that." Well, the indigenous population, 80% of them get diabetes.
Right. Okay.
That's a fact.
Okay.
So
I don't know if it's a
people
fact.
calling in and saying diabetes, you're fat, you're a slob. 80% of indigenous people get diabetes in this country. So they're not fat. And all this word that these people are using, right? Me, personally, myself,
yes.
What I think,
right.
What Quebec did was fantastic.
Oh, you like what Premier Legault did? Yeah, okay.
I love what he did.
Okay.
You know what? These people that do not want to get vaccinated, where me and my wife and everybody I know has gone out and got the shots, 3 shots.
Yeah.
Stay away from people, wear a mask. If you don't want to follow the rules, and there are people in the hospital that are non-vaxxers that are sick or taking up, what happened if my wife has a heart attack tonight? And there's some non-vaxxer in there.
Right. Yes. Yes. No, I don't think you'll like that, Steve. No, right. I've never known you to have a sunny disposition, as a matter of fact, Steve.
You know what? I say to those people, if you don't want to follow the rules and regulations of Ontario, get out.
All right. Thank you, Steve. Get out.
Okay.
Get out. All right. You get out, Steve. Get out. 10:46. Be right back. Final quarter, talk back hour on the Rob Snow Show.
So Rideau Rockcliffe Community Resource Centre has been around since 1982, and it's here to serve residents of Ward 13. So our focus is on helping to reduce poverty in this community, as well as empowering residents to find resilience within themselves. So one of the new focuses of our centre is around food programming. So you'll notice today when we go around on a little tour that we have a number of food programs here at the centre. So one being obviously our emergency food program, which is really great. So residents can come and access food when they are in need. We also have a number of food-based social enterprises here at Rideau Rockcliffe as well. So one being the Ottawa Good Food Box, another being Market Mobile. One of our new initiatives that started this year as response to COVID is called Good Food on the Move, and it's a click and collect online store, and we have 7 pickup locations throughout the city. More sort of local here for Ward 13 residents, we've also started a free produce market as well. So community members can come on Wednesdays and Fridays and be able to access additional free fruits and vegetables.
Social Harvest Ottawa is one of the social enterprises here at the Rideau Rockcliffe Community Resource Centre. We operate this great urban greenhouse, and our work is not only to grow nutritious and delicious food, but also to nourish communities with community members here in Ward 13 and beyond. The greenhouse is a year-round project. We're a team of 4 employees working here. We have 2 full-time employees and 2 part-time employees. We focus on growing microgreens from late fall to early spring, and hothouse crops in the summertime, such as tomatoes and cucumbers.
The Mission Food Truck we're in our 5th week of collaborating with them to come visit our center, and we just got in on it at the right time. They were looking for new communities to branch out to. They said absolutely. Right now they're funded through donations. They travel around Ottawa and just give out delicious, fresh, hot food to people as well. We have at our center the Ottawa Good Food Box, as well as the Market Mobile. So Ottawa Good Food Box has been around for 25 years, and Market Mobile is a little younger, started in 2014. So they both have the mission and the mandate of making fresh food more accessible and affordable in neighborhoods that lack access to a grocery store. So I think the greatest need that we've seen as a result of the pandemic in our community is people that we maybe have never needed to access our services before, right? So a lot of people have had, layoffs. Maybe they're just not able to work because they have to stay home with their children, over the summer, that sort of thing. So we've definitely seen the need go out, particularly for our food programming, as well as some of our counseling services as well. So it's a heavy time for people emotionally.
Hello. On the Rob Snow Show. The phone lines are open at 613-750-1310.
Now, the Rob Snow Show continues.
Should we accommodate the unvaccinated? It was Aaron O'Toole that kind of got this conversation going within the last week or so. Comments made by the leader of the opposition. This was Aaron O'Toole on reasonable accommodation for the unvaccinated.
We can also have reasonable accommodations for some people that may not be vaccinated, particularly in jobs like trucking and others, where it can be accommodated without any medical risk.
Okay, so what is your opinion on this? I've heard it time and again. I've heard it this week. Okay, you don't like the idea of mandatory vaccination for everyone, as Mr. Duclos suggested last week. You don't like, for the most part, the idea of a special tax just for unvaccinated individuals, Quebec style. So does that mean, and I'm just trying to follow along here, okay, that you feel the unvaccinated should be accommodated? 750-1310. I mean, are you okay with a frontline healthcare worker being unvaccinated and treating a loved one of yours in a hospital or treating you in the hospital? Are you okay with an unvaccinated worker being employed in a long-term care home, looking after your parents or your grandparents? Would you be okay with a teacher teaching your child in a classroom or in an Ontario school, as long as they're accommodated by way of being tested on a regular basis, right? That's the alternative. Okay, you don't want to get the shot? Fine, we're going to stick this thing up your nose every day or every second day or multiple times a day or whatever the reasonable accommodation looks like. 750-1310, 750-1310. David in Vanier. Good morning, David.
Good morning, Rob.
Hi, David.
I watch the news faithfully, and I listen to what they say on the internet,
And I have my vaccines. In fact, I finally got my booster this week, being an ordinary person, not one of the specified ones.
Yeah.
And I think that we should accommodate them by having re-education camps for them to go to.
Re-education camps, good gosh. All right, David. I think our conversation is just going to end right there, David. It started off promising enough, but you kind of crashed and burned at the end there. Ches, Canada, Ches.
Hey, hi, Rob.
Hi,
It's me again. Yeah, I'm going to invoke that, eye of the idol, but be careful what you wish for. The two previous callers, right? He says, if you don't like it, get out, right? Well, then, if he loves Legault's decision, then he might love his Bill 21, right? If you don't like it, get out. That's the slippery slope we're going under. So, reasonable accommodation. You got to break down that word and what is reasonable, okay? You know as well as I do, prior to vaccines being available, who was going into work? Doctors, nurses, truck drivers, to make sure the lifeblood of the economy was working, and then we had reasonable health care. So I don't think you can just dismiss his statement, reasonable, accommodation. You have to break it down, and what is truly reasonable. Now, you cited the person working in the healthcare and the hospital, but aren't vaccines in those venues required?
They are required, yeah. They are required.
Exactly.
Yeah,
So what is reasonable then? Like the truck driver that's bringing, needed goods across the country, when he gets to his loading terminal, someone takes over, puts the load on the platform, and then it goes on from there. So you really got to break down reasonable and not just, think about, like what Legault is doing. And then, I was appalled to hear that 50 or 60% of Canadians support his tax. I guess they would love the idea that Macron there just declared a bunch of unvaccinated, non-citizens. Are we going to go to that point now? You see, because it just keeps getting worse and worse, So people have to be rational and think about what is being said in terms of reasonable accommodation. I'm fully vaccinated. I got my booster, It's, I think there has to be more of a conversation because,
we're trying to have the conversation. That's why we're doing this hour. Yeah. That's why we do it. Ches, thank you. Thank you, everybody. As usual, this happens all the time. People call with like 5 minutes to go on the show and jam the phone lines. So let's try and get through this. In Ottawa South, Bob, you're on City News. Should we reasonably accommodate the unvaccinated?
There should be. To impose this tax, that's a slippery slope. It sets a principle. And I keep hearing this word reasonable accommodation. And if we really valued democracy, I look at Recep Erdogan in Turkey, used the idea of reasonable accommodation to get where he is today. I think Canadians, if we value democracy, we've got to take a long, hard look at this. If we use his example, we're headed down the wrong road.
All right. Thank you. Thank you, Bob. Okay. All right. Next, Mike, Smiths Falls. Should we accommodate the unvaccinated, Mike?
Hey, Rob. How are you today?
Good, sir. Thank you.
Good. I think that we should. I think that, the government has been wrong on every stance they took so far. Okay. Doug Ford will... in 3 weeks from now, he'll be taxing people. He's changed his mind on everything he's done so far.
You think so? Okay.
Well, I mean...
That's not what he said yesterday. That's not what he said. Yeah, we're not going there, he said. We're not going there.
He also said schools were the last to close and first to open.
Sure. Right. I'm in it for the little guy.
Well,
open for business. Doug Ford has said a lot of things.
Booster. Are they ready for their fourth? Israel's took their third. They're starting their fourth booster, Yeah. When does it stop? When does it get to the point where we say, okay, we were wrong. We shouldn't have taxed people, It's just, this has been ongoing where, I think the government needs to step back a little bit. I mean, Doug Ford is definitely out of his comfort zone in the position he's in. He's made every wrong decision. I mean, anybody who disagrees with him in his cabinet gets the boot. Or his caucus, I should say.
Yeah, well, I don't think he's unique there as a premier. If you disagree with the premier, why would you want to be in the cabinet if you're going to disagree with the premier?
I mean, they don't disagree on every issue. which is part of our democracy, right? Everybody has a free train.
But they should be accommodated, right? They should be accommodated.
They should be accommodated.
Okay.
Not to take up your time, but that's how I feel.
Okay, and fair enough, sir. Thank you. We'll only take two more, David. Wade in the Ottawa region, it says. The Ottawa region. Wade?
Yes.
Hello, sir. Should we accommodate the unvaccinated?
No, we should not.
Well, we should not. Okay. All right. And why, Wade?
Simply because I believe that Quebec is on the right path with a tax for the non-vax.
You like the tax. Okay.
Because smokers, I'm a smoker. I get taxed. I pay a heavy levy on tobacco.
You do? Yes, you do. Yeah.
To support the healthcare system because I choose to smoke.
Right.
Liquor is taxed because you choose to drink.
Yes, yes.
And it puts a burden on healthcare. If we all didn't smoke and didn't drink, our healthcare system would be a lot better off.
Right.
So I think it's the right path. It's not unconstitutional. If so, then everything we've done throughout Canadian history is unconstitutional.
Okay. Well, we'll see. We'll see, because I suspect, and smarter people than you and me, Wade, will decide whether it's constitutional or not. But we'll see how it ends up. And this will be the last call of the hour. It's been very busy. Gloria in Canada. Good morning, Gloria.
Good morning, Rob.
Should we accommodate the unvaccinated?
No. Let me say this quickly. We should not tax them. However, we should ask them to be registered, and that would be mandatory. Registered in a proper medical facilities, etc. We should also limit their access legally to anyone who has a compromised immune system or lung disease. That would, in my mind, and I'm not the expert, but that would limit access to all kinds of areas, hospitals, retirement homes, you name it.
Wow.
That would do it.
Pretty tough stuff, Gloria. Pretty tough stuff, Gloria. Pretty tough.
We're all fighting COVID. At least most of us are.
Yeah.
And that's all we can do, is to help to limit its access to those vulnerable people. Okay?
Yep. Thank you. Thank you, Gloria. You got to run. The news is coming up next in the final hour of the Rob Snow Show. Thank you for all your calls. Friday free-for-all tomorrow during the Talkback Hour. We'll be right back. City News.
one for local news in Ottawa and the Valley. This is City News, now on 101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
It's Thursday, January 13th. Good morning. I'm Andrew Boyle. Right now in Ottawa, minus 10 degrees. In Smiths Falls, minus 8. Here's what's making news in Ottawa and the Valley. Latest COVID numbers in Ontario show 500 people currently in ICUs province-wide. That's actually down by 5 from yesterday's figure. Also, 3,630 people currently in a hospital in Ontario with the virus. In the province, another 35 deaths have been recorded from COVID, and the latest testing shows just over 9,900 cases province-wide. 494 of these are in Ottawa, 220 in Eastern Ontario, 56 in Leeds, Grenville, Lanark, another 35 cases in Renfrew County. City News time, 11:02, and now your forecast with meteorologist Jill Taylor.
We'll get into some more flurries, especially for the late afternoon into the evening. Could collect a centimeter or two. The wind today will be light and variable. The high about -5 will drop to -18 for the low, and then a lot colder again for the high for tomorrow. The high just -16, but lots of sunshine. For today, the high -5.
And right now, minus 10 degrees in Ottawa, -8 in Smiths Falls. There are signs the spread of the Omicron variant is peaking in Ottawa if our wastewater is to be believed. This has been used as a measuring stick through this pandemic. Our top doctor in the city says it's still a little too early to make the call, though.
It does look like some of the measures there are decreasing just slightly, but we see sometimes they can go up and down, right? So you could never really call a trend on a couple of days worth of data.
Now, Dr. Vera Etches says hospitalizations tend to drop about 5 days after wastewater levels, so the public health unit is on the lookout for that over the next few days. Russia is sharply raising the stakes in a showdown with the West over Ukraine. Reporter Karen Chamas this morning says a top Russian diplomat is warned that Moscow would consider deploying troops to Cuba and Venezuela if tensions with NATO continue to mount.
Russian Deputy Foreign Minister Sergei Ryabkov said in an interview that President Vladimir Putin did not rule out technical military measures if the US were to provoke Russia. The statement comes after recent failed talks in Geneva and Vienna on Moscow's demand for security guarantees against NATO's eastward expansion.
Now, the crisis began with a large buildup of Russian troops along Ukraine's eastern border, prompting fears of possible invasion. Russia insists it has no invasion plans. City News time, 11:03. Ottawa's Rachel Holman will be competing at the Olympics. Her and curling partner John Morris have been chosen to represent the country in mixed curling. Curling Canada had to select a team because last month's playdowns were cancelled due to COVID. Morris won mixed doubles gold with Caitlin Laws at the 2018 Games in the discipline's Olympic debut. Holman represented Canada in the women's team event that year. This year, it's Laws representing Canada in women's curling as third in the Jennifer Jones rink. Brad Gushu will be skipping the men's team. It's a unique fundraiser designed to lift the spirits of frontline healthcare workers, and it's well past its goal. Now over $7,900 has been raised for the Feeding the Frontline campaign. That originally asked for $5,000 to go to Ottawa restaurants and purchase meals as a thank you to frontline medical staff. And the 50-50 draw in support of the Snowsuit Fund in Ottawa has topped $250,000 to the winner. As it stands, a winning ticket holder will take over $260,000. The draw is being held tomorrow, so tickets on sale until then, starting at $10 for 5 of them. You can pick up tickets at snowsuitfund5050.com. I'm Andrew Boyle for News Anytime. Follow up online at ottawa.citynews.ca.
Firm.
Fair.
Fun.
The Rob Snow Show returns
on Rogers TV and City News, 101.1 FM
and 1310 AM.
It's great to welcome back to the Rob Snow Show to talk a little bit more about the return to school. The Director of Education for the Ottawa Catholic School Board, Tom D'Amico. Good morning, Mr. D'Amico.
Good morning, Rob. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
We're doing well, thank you.
It's just we're looking at the weather forecast, and if back to school is supposed to be Monday, we're going to get a snowstorm on Monday. The first day back to school might be a snow day.
We're certainly used to being agile and flexible.
I suppose if you're not by now, you never will be, I guess, Mr. D'Amico. But yeah, it's going to be an interesting Monday, that's for sure, at least from a weather point of view. So I know you've been, paying very close attention to everything that's going on and preparing for having children back in class. What do you think of the latest measures that have been announced by the Ontario government?
Well, I think to start off, we're glad at this stage that we know that we're returning. That's what the majority of parents and staff wanted. I do know and recognize it's not the preferred preference for everyone. Some people prefer to stay virtual, and we'll try and give them that option. The announcements from the government was not too much of a surprise. We are pleased with some of the resources we're receiving. So there are improvements that were put in place that weren't there prior to Christmas.
Okay. How many schools are there for the Ottawa Catholic School Board, roughly, Mr. D'Amico?
We have 85 schools. 83 are in-person schools, and we have 2 virtual schools.
Okay. So of the physical schools, how many have received upgrades to their HVAC systems, filtration systems, these sorts of things? This is a major source of anxiety for parents, of course, is filtration.
Yeah, it certainly is. I'm glad you've asked that question. 100% is the answer to your question, and maybe I'll give a few more details. So ventilation has been important throughout all of the different waves of the pandemic, not just now as a result of Omicron. We know the government announced that our board is getting 51 additional HEPA filters. That's about a $50,000 investment. So we're happy to receive that. But prior to now, as of last September, we'd invested over $15 million in improvements in ventilation and HVAC right across our system. So while a portable HEPA filter really is a nice visible sign in a classroom that you have improved air quality, we have 1,100 portable HEPA filters currently in place. Those are in areas like the lunchroom, or it could be the kindergarten classes, any classroom that has children with fragile or medical needs. But every other class takes advantage of the units that are on our roof. Some of these are $1 million units. We have 225 ventilators and portables that have MERV 13 filters. So a $1,000 HEPA filter does not mean that a class beside it that doesn't have it is not benefiting from the $500,000 unit. So 100% of our classes are properly ventilated, and we do have that on our website, so parent can go to the website. They can see all the changes that have happened at their individual school, and we're proud to say that we meet or exceed all of the ASHRAE standards.
Wow, that's very impressive. Now, in terms of another issue is the availability of testing kits for students. What is available for students for testing?
Yeah, I'll start by saying what was there prior to Christmas. So prior to Christmas, if a student was ill at school and they were being sent home, we were part of a pilot with Ottawa Public Health and with CHEO, and we did have PCR tests available, take-home kits. Those are the gold standard kits. So students could take those home, they would then do the test, and they would drop it off, and we would send it through a public health nurse for them to get the results. So we still have some of those kits in our schools, a very small supply if someone becomes ill at school. We will use those. We'll send them home, but my understanding is that pilot has ended. They won't be replenished. What we're waiting on, and the delivery is either this Friday, Saturday, or Sunday, is the equivalent of 2 tests for every single employee at our board and for every student. So that's about 5,000 employees and 46,000 students. We will come in on the weekend. We will separate those into packages of 2, and each student will receive 2 tests. The intent of those tests when they are at school on Monday or Tuesday is that they'll take those home with them. And if at any point they start to have symptoms, they can use those tests so they know that they're clear to return to school when they have 2 negative tests. That's the starting point that we've received information from the government. Their plan is to continue to use their sources, and we anticipate getting many, many kits throughout the rest of the school year. So we're pleased with that option.
Okay. How would you describe, or maybe you can describe for us, the availability of KN95 or N95 masks for staff?
Well, we certainly did not have access to them prior to the holidays. We could not have ordered a large quantity, but what we did receive during this break was 201,000 masks, and that's just for the month of January. for our staff. So all of our staff have N95 masks available. It's a choice whether they want to wear the medical masks or the N95. Some may find that to do their job, they prefer the medical masks. From the Ministry of Health perspective and the Ministry of Labor, both are acceptable masks. So we're pleased to have those, and we will continue to receive that supply throughout the rest of this year. That's our understanding.
Okay. How prepared are you for staff shortages? There are plans to employ retired teachers or student teachers. What are the plans in case of staffing shortages for teachers?
Yeah, that's on everyone's mind, Rob, for sure, including our staff. We've been dealing with staff shortages and unfilled jobs for the last 2 years, so this is not new to us in the education sector. What's happened is it's worsened because of the Omicron and the number of staff that have had to isolate, including when they're not sick, but a family member tests positive and they're required to stay home. So what we have in place is our supply list, which includes new teachers at our Teachers College. It also has retirees. You've likely heard that there was a change that retirees that were limited to 50 days can now do 95. So we're really fortunate to have wonderful retirees who come back to contribute to their board and to their schools. So many of them will continue. Every day when a principal goes into work, that's one of their first tasks, is to be creative to figure out how to cover absences. So if necessary, they will have temporary transition from for example, a resource teacher, or it could be a teacher librarian, move them into unfilled classes if needed. We also put in place last year our classroom supervisors. So we hired about 350 university students that may have 2 days a week that they were available. They're not qualified teachers. They're only used when we can't find a qualified educator, and they're there to supervise the class. So they will come in and provide that supervision. In some cases, the example of a teacher who's self-isolating but is not sick, they're still able to instruct and teach that class remotely. So the students could be in the classroom with a classroom supervisor, and the teacher is providing the lesson from home. So those are all the ideal scenarios that we put in place. Even after all of that, we may find that we still have unfilled jobs because of the spread of the virus. So in some cases, if needed, we will be forced to close either a classroom or a grade level or possibly a school. I shouldn't use the word close. We would transition them to remote learning. So instead of closing down 85 schools like we've just went through and putting them to remote, we may find one school that we have to move to remote. And our goal would be as quickly as possible to find additional coverage to open that school back up for in-person learning.
Okay. What is your opinion of this 30% rule, not notifying people of an outbreak until absenteeism reaches 30%? What is your opinion on that?
Well, I'm going to give you my opinion. It's not an informed opinion yet because we're still waiting on the memo. We have not received the details yet from the Ministry of Education. The software is expected to come this Friday. So we really have to see the logistics of what it is we're being asked to report, whether it's 30% above traditional attendance rates, or it's 30% absence that are confirmed due to illness, or is it 30% of staff and students that are just not at school. It will be very difficult until we have those benchmarks. For example, if I have a class of 20 students, I could have 6 students that are not attending. It doesn't mean the 6 are away sick because of the virus. We could have 3 students that have decided through their parents to wait for a week or 2 before they're ready to come back to school, to in-person learning. And we could have some students that are taking advantage of our learning management system and deciding to work at home for a time period. So it's hard to really tell you exactly what it will look like. I'm anticipating by midweek next week we will have it operationalized. We'll continue to work with Ottawa Public Health and the other 3 school boards. And our goal is the same as the parents. We want people to be informed, and we want them to make decisions that work for their family.
Okay. Mr. D'Amico, good luck.
All right, I appreciate it.
Hope everything goes well next week.
Thank you. Have a good afternoon.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Tom D'Amico is Director of Education, Ottawa Catholic School Board. Peter Tilley is the Executive Director of the Ottawa Mission. He's up next on City News.
Opening a business especially in a pandemic, in that kind of situation, is very challenging. First, People don't know me. People don't know my product. To build a new clientele, to build a trust for them, to show them that I care about it. I do love my food. That was the biggest challenge. And of course, in all lockdown, where I had to face it regards my employee, girls, ladies, what they work for me. I didn't want to tell them, sorry, I'm closed, I'm not having a job for you. No, they have families, they have kids to feed. So this is very important because we are family orientated. And we decided to open. We, of course, essential business. So been very tough, very, very tough, as we didn't see people on the road. Market was completely quiet, but we knew that we have to wait, and we knew that we're gonna be fine. In this town, we built online shop, Vedel Online, and we did Uber Eats, which one is picking up and is very, very popular. We have a really good feedback. So this is the song from my heart. And and we try to expand. I'm thinking about opening another location. So I want to make Vedel famous. I want to make the Vedel place to be for all the families with kids. Try the traditional food, what their grandparents cooked in the countries when they're from, or even Canadian people. They're more than welcome to come and try our famous pierogis. I try to be passionate about my food, organic food, food made with love, with all homemade, organic. So you can find food from all over the Europe: Polish, German, Ukrainian, Romanian, French, Armenian. So all kind of different types of food. Homemade lunches. We focus on the homemade lunches, grandma style. I keep always saying, like in my Genia Babcia house, how she cooked. I wanted this love and this food over here because I believe that will bring all people around me. And all the organic cold cuts, lovely selection of sausages, cheeses, European cheeses, great selections of mustards, French cookies. All what you need from Europe you can find here at the Vedel Touch of Europe. If you think good way, that's it. You have to. I had the option to cry in the corner and say, oh, pandemic is coming. No, you need to stand up and fight for it and have your eyes open, think outside of the box and do it.
The Rob Snow Show returns
on Rogers TV and City News,
101.1 FM
and 1310 AM.
Peter Tilley is the executive director of the Ottawa mission. He's back with me on the Rob Snow Show on City News. Good morning, Peter.
Good morning, Rob.
Yeah, it's great to hear from you again. What is the current situation at the mission, given the recent cold snap, more of that weather on the way, and the highly contagious Omicron variant? That would seem to be a terrible combination.
Well, they say things come in three, Rob, so let's hope they don't, because you're right, the cold snap has our staff working long hours dealing with that situation amongst all the shelters. And then, of course, this Omicron variant, there's an outbreak, of course, in the entire city of Ottawa, so there's no exception amongst the shelters that we've had, all of us, several positive cases, clients, sometimes staff. And the fortunate thing is we've been through this drill so many times. We've got it under pat where we can get people moved on to the isolation center. We know how for staff to immediately report in rather than come in on their shift. If they're feeling any symptoms, they're to stay home, go get tested, and wait for the results. Fortunate now, the waiting period has been moved for employers to 6 to 7 days, providing they have 2 days of rapid test that are negative. So that's been a help, because there's staff shortages during these times all over the city, especially in this field of frontline service providers, whether hospitals, other healthcare providers, and certainly here at the shelters, we're certainly dealing with staff shortages. But everything's been good. We've been able to cover all shifts. We have a great team, and many of them have committed to try and come in and offer to work overtime.
Okay. Ottawa Public Health estimates that about 80% of the city's population that experiences homelessness, 80% of that population is vaccinated. Is that your sense of it from your clients at the mission?
I know at times we've seen numbers as high as 80%. We, of course, have a transient population. We have people moving in and out of the shelters when we're constantly providing vaccination opportunities here because we have a health clinic right on board beside the Ottawa Mission, our primary care clinic. So as soon as people book in, we want to know their status. We encourage them to be vaccinated, to get a vaccine, to get the booster in this case. So we can be as high as 80%. Sometimes we can be a little below that depending on the transient nature of our people. But fortunately, we've had the support of Ottawa Public Health and Ottawa Inner City Health to make it a priority to get the homeless population, a very vulnerable population, vaccinated. So it's been great success, we think, in the fact that we haven't seen higher numbers here amongst our population.
Okay, so the city is running some respite centers, Tom Brown, Nicholas, and Dempsey Heron Physical Distancing Center for Women. Tell me about these respite centers and how they're helping to alleviate some of the strain, Peter.
Our hats off to the city for coming on board. We've been in consultation calls with them the last week and a half when we saw the weather shift. A lot of people in our population, Rob, they're very independent. They're very self-sufficient. People don't realize that, and they're very careful, especially many don't want to come into a place like a shelter where they hear in the news and all the media attention around an Omicron outbreak. They don't feel safe, but this weather drives them indoors. People have no choice with this cold Canadian winter, and our efforts to try and get them to come indoors. So we've been working with the city to try and provide options, and they've come up with Tom Brown, Dempsey, and other options that if people report here, we have an option. We're still respecting the physical distancing parameters, so our dorm rooms of 8 still have to be dorm rooms of 4, etc. And that makes it tough when people need to come in out of the cold. So how great the city's come through to help quickly set up these respite centers and have a provision available for those people who choose now that they have to seek shelter on these minus 20 Canadian winter days.
Yeah. Just on that point, great. Yeah, I'm glad to hear that. Just on that point of trying to convince someone to go inside when it gets that cold outside. There are some people who they prefer to live on the street, right, Peter?
Yeah.
They don't want to be around people, whatever the case might be, if it's mental illness or whatever the case might be. It's all you can do to get them into a shelter. You can't force someone into a shelter, though, can you? You can't.
No.
Like you couldn't call the police or something. Could you? Or could you? I don't know what the law is even. If somebody's, it's minus 30 outside, and you know this person is going to die if they have to sleep outside in Ottawa. They could die. What can you do in that circumstance?
We've been through a few of those scenarios, of course, because you're right. People do have mental health challenges. People do suffer from anxiety and fear, and some people do really, even in the summer months, not to be around any other people, any crowds. They prefer to isolate, whether it's just their need to be away from people. But we find that we've been through that where we've had people, our frontline staff, have to deal with someone just a couple of years ago. I remember was freezing to death on a back porch of one of the houses within our area. Our frontline staff are out doing regular patrols, especially on these cold winter days, to make sure no one is outside. So we have the Salvation Army van that's there in the community to take people in, get them warm, and get them to some form of shelter. And, it's not so much strong-arming people, but just, people do have a will to live, all people, and taking advantage of that when somebody's getting close to a situation of dying from exposure, we get people inside. And very fortunately, thanks to the efforts of our frontline staff and those of all the shelters, and thanks to the Salvation Army van that's out there in the community, we haven't seen a horrible situation as we saw a few days ago in Montreal, where somebody actually
died.
Somebody died of exposure. So, that's part of my morning prayers on nights like this when it's minus 20 out, is that we get through another night. When I go to bed, that's what I'm asking for, is we get through another night where everybody will be safe and sound and indoors and warm. These Canadian winters are brutal, and I'm looking at the Weather Network online and seeing what's coming up, Rob. It's not going to be a pleasant
No, it's
week.
not going to be good. No, it's not good. How much room do you have there? How many people can you fit in there?
So normally when we're at full capacity, we can go up to about 258 people, counting the mats we put down on the chapel room floor. We're down by about 60 beds that we've isolated, or that we've sort of, sanctioned off, that we're not going to have people occupying. So that's where the respite centers come in, especially during the cold. So, we've had to reduce our capacity levels just because of the pandemic.
And have you seen any reduction in the demand for the service?
No, sorry. It's unfortunately that our services are needed more than ever, especially the mental health and addictions piece. The hardest part of the first 2 months of this pandemic is, everything was in lockdown everywhere. Nobody knew what had hit us. But gradually by May and June and July and August 2020, we began to open up services. And now our addictions program is opened up, taking people into the stabilization program, into our off-site Lifehouse program, and our second stage housing. So those are fully operational. Counseling is fully operational, and everything is going well in that regard.
Okay. I hear some dinging in the background. Do you have to go, or are you okay?
Sorry, no, that was just our, we have a speaker system.
Okay.
Paging someone to come to the front desk.
All right. Okay. No, I just have one more question for you. There's this, I saw this crazy story last week out of Edmonton. I'm not sure if you're aware of this, and even the police are looking into it, that people who are unvaccinated in Edmonton have been paying homeless people to go get vaccinated so that they can download the passport onto their phone and use the QR code. Like one person, a homeless person in Edmonton, got vaccinated 7 times in a day, 7 times. So this is exploitation of the homeless. How vulnerable are homeless people to that kind of exploitation, Peter?
I can't see that happening here, and I'm surprised it happened there, Rob. It's, people who choose not to get vaccinated from our population, many of them just have the usual apprehension that even some of the general population have. They haven't been, they haven't heard enough evidence to convince them they need to get vaccinated. When someone books in here, they're immediately visited with the frontline staff, usually one of our female members of frontline staff. We find they're more receptive to hearing from them, and if they still have an aversion to getting vaccinated, we'll have one of the nurses from the clinic go up and meet with them and walk them through it.
Yeah, but here you have vaccinated people who are not homeless, people, like affluent, unvaccinated people are saying to homeless people, go get vaccinated for me and I'll pay you.
Oh, that's
Go
terrible.
pretend to meet. And one person got vaccinated 7 times.
I hadn't heard of that, but that's terrible.
It's exploitation. They're exploiting the homeless, right? So.
Wow. Let's hope we don't see those days here. I'm certain we'd be quick to put a
You haven't
stop
heard anything like that. You haven't heard about anything like that.
Not at all.
No.
Not at all.
All right. Yeah.
Sounds like an Edmonton story.
Yeah, it is. It is an Edmonton story. Okay. All right. Look, is there anything you need from the public?
People to keep us in mind. Where any winter belongs in that. People are. It's for us in a homeless shelter, the needs don't end at Christmas like many people think. Everybody helps and donates before Christmas, but we always remind people they can go to our website, ottawamission.com, and just check out ways they can get involved. Of course, because of the pandemic, we've had a shortage of volunteers too, so anyone who's fully vaccinated is welcome to sign up and come in and help us out in that regard and go through the orientation and the protocol. to volunteer, or people can donate. We are going to have to increase our support for people to keep them warm at this time.
Yeah.
So.
All right, Peter. All the best. Thank you.
Wonderful.
Stay in touch.
Thanks again,
Bye-bye.
Rob. Thanks for all you do.
Yep. Bye-bye. Peter Tilley is the executive director of the mission. A little late for the news, but some important information there. This is the Rob Snow Show on City News.
In Ottawa and the Valley. This is City News, now on 101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
It's Thursday, January 13th. Good morning, I'm Alex Gouge. Right now in Ottawa, -9, feeling like -15 with the wind chill. And in Smiths Falls, it's -8. Here's what's making news this hour. Ontario health officials say there are 500 people in intensive care units in the province, which is down 5 from yesterday. A total of 3,630 people are in Ontario hospitals due to the virus. Another 35 deaths from COVID-19 have also been confirmed. This comes as testing shows over 9,900 new cases across the province. U.S. truckers will still have to be fully vaccinated in order to cross the border into Canada on Saturday, but the federal government is backing down from its order that Canadian truckers must have their shots. And the Canada Border Services Agency is telling the Canadian press that unvaccinated Canadian truckers, or those who only have one dose, won't have to quarantine. A mobile vaccination clinic against COVID-19 is making a couple stops in the region. The Eastern Ontario Health Unit says the GoVax clinic will stop in Cornwall on Saturday and Hawkesbury on Sunday. You can book a spot for first, second, or booster shot through the provincial booking system starting tomorrow morning at 8 for the Cornwall Clinic, which is Saturday at the Civic Complex between 1 and 7. Booking for the Hawkesbury shot at the Sportsplex is Saturday. The clinic will be Sunday from 11 in the morning until 5 in the afternoon. City News Time, 11:34. I'm Alex Gouge. For news anytime, follow up online at ottawa.citynews.ca.
He's the opinionated Ottawa icon.
The Rob Snow Show returns
on Rogers TV and City News.
101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
What do Canadians think of the unvaccinated? Christian Bourque is Executive Vice President at Leger. Good morning.
Good morning.
Nice to hear from you.
Well, happy to be here.
What sort of public opinion research have you done on how we feel about people who remain unvaccinated?
Well, we polled on that after the first sort of major vaccination campaign, and opinions were fairly negative from the vaccinated Canadians to the unvaccinated. Now, we haven't polled specifically on that in the recent months, but we are considering it given the data or the evolution of the data we're seeing now. So we're seeing basically three major trends. One is a steady decline in support for what governments are doing to fight the pandemic. I think there's sort of an element of COVID fatigue that was to be expected that I think is happening right now. So even if you took the two provinces where the level of satisfaction was highest, was Quebec and BC, with Legault and Horgan. But both have been trending down, and now their support is in the low 60s. Support for Doug Ford is below 50% now, fairly steadily. It's down to 28% for Premier Kenney. So it seems to get, it's getting tougher and tougher to get people to sort of, give the high five back that the governments are doing the right thing. And we believe one of the reasons is that people are starting to feel that, hey, how come I can't go to this store? How come this is closed? Or in the case of some provinces, how come there's a curfew again that's hurting vaccinated Canadians while the problem are the unvaccinated? And I think governments, and we've seen it in Europe, in Austria, Germany, France, we've seen it with the Prime Minister of Canada, Prime Minister or Premier of Quebec, now being very tough and very vocal about it's your fault and pointing to the unvaccinated, something we would have never anticipated just a few months back. But it seems that it's the sort of the last resort to get people to basically stay as disciplined as they have been over the past 16 months.
Yeah. Well, let's listen to, this was the only English response from Premier Legault when he announced his vaxi tax, the policy for the taxing the unvaccinated. This is what he said.
How are you going to manage this? This is a big deal.
Okay. Yes, it's a big deal. If you look at what's happening in other countries or other states, everybody is trying to find a solution, a question of equity, because right now, these people, they put a very important burden on our healthcare network. And I think it's normal that the majority of the population is asking that there be a consequence. And yes, we will continue to look at spreading the use of the vaccine passport, but I think we have to go further. And I think that right now, it's a question also of fairness for the 90% of the population who made some sacrifices. I think we owe them this kind of mercy.
We owe them. Okay, that's interesting. But he's really talking about silos there, by the sounds of things. When you listen, I know that's his second language, but the words, those people, they're a burden. That's another word that he used. They're a burden, and that this is about fairness. Do you think he's tapping into the prevailing public opinion there, Mr. Bourque?
I would assume that, just like we are, I'm assuming he's polling on it. Because when he introduced a new measure about 10 days ago, where he said that from now on you would need the vaccine passport to access government-run liquor stores and cannabis stores, most people simply just applauded. Because, again, it was putting a further burden on those who are unvaccinated. And even how the Quebec government is now reporting on figures when it comes to hospitalizations, they continually say, although the unvaccinated only account for less than 10% of the population, they're responsible for over half of the people in ICU, in the ICU across the province. They're trying again to point the finger. And because it's happening elsewhere as well, I believe that our political elites are finding out that this is sort of the next phase in terms of getting the vaccinated folks to stay on board.
Yeah, burden. I find that term really interesting because it's the exact same word that Jean-Yves Duclos, the federal health minister, used on Friday when he talked about encouraging the provinces to start having conversations about a mandatory vaccination for everyone. Just very quickly, it's a short clip. Let's listen
and
to that.
I see in my own province 50% of hospitalizations now in Quebec
are due to people not having been vaccinated. That's a burden on healthcare workers.
A burden on interesting. Okay. So you said there were three things that you're seeing. A decline in government support being one, and we've talked about that. So what are the others that you're seeing?
Yeah, the others, and we found in our report this week, is steadily close to 2 out of 3 Canadians would be supportive of people having to show proof of vaccination to access public transit, to be able to access liquor stores across the country, even being able to go to a mall or a retail store, something which we would have not expected before. And one of the statements actually went as far as saying, would you be in favor of hospitals and clinics having separate areas to treat the vaccinated and unvaccinated patients? And again, close to 2 out of 3 Canadians were supportive of that. So this sort of hardening discourse on the non-vaccinated, I think, is showing that it's getting sort of enough support that governments need to pay attention.
Okay. This idea that we should have reasonable accommodation, which was the term used by the Conservative leader, Aaron O'Toole, in recent days. We should have reasonable accommodation for the unvaccinated. He's been accused of being outside the mainstream when he says something like that. Is he outside the mainstream? Sounds like he's outside the mainstream on that.
Absolutely. Well, he would be against sort of the consensus on it. I think, though, that it is tapping in to this sort of, the history of that is as long as Canada, would be sort of the small C conservative mindset. And probably that mindset does not like anything that's made mandatory to start with, regardless of what it is. And I believe some provinces in particular, Manitoba, Saskatchewan, and Alberta, not to name them, will resist more than any other provinces to move towards anything that would further restrict the civil liberties of people who are not vaccinated. But in other jurisdictions, those limitations seem to be awfully popular.
Okay. And finally, you said there were 3 issues. What was the third?
Well, the third is one of the statements, we asked people to choose between 2 opinions. Okay. And that's where I think governments need to pay attention. We said, some people feel that the Omicron variant, because it's spreading very quickly, should make our governments put in sort of stricter measures in place to fight it. And that 56% of Canadians agreed with that. But then 31%, so fully a third of Canadians said, well, you know what? It's not as serious as previous variants in terms of potential consequences. So we should just learn to live with the risk and live with it, which sort of the Boris Johnson perspective in Great Britain.
Right.
And fully close to 3 out of 10 vaccinated Canadians feel that this is or should be the way to go. So this idea that, well, you know, I'm 3 shots now of the vaccine. Let me roam the streets and live with the risk, because I don't think I'm carrying that much of a risk.
Very interesting. Christian Bourque, thank you so much for your time.
My pleasure.
All the best. Yeah, Executive Vice President of Leger. That's Christian Bourque. This is the Rob Snow Show on City News.
Rob Snow Show returns
on Rogers TV and City News.
101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
So let's begin the morning with Post Media columnist and author Randall Denley. Good morning, Randall. Welcome back.
Hi, Rob.
What was the challenge yesterday for the Education Minister, Stephen Lecce, and Ontario's Chief Medical Officer of Health, Dr. Kieran Moore? What did they have to do yesterday? What was the mission?
Kind of awkward for them because, Moore had said on a Friday, school will reopen on a Wednesday. And then on Monday, last week, the Premier got up and said, no. Terribly, terribly dangerous. We're closing the schools. And now here we are in the next week. Time to open the schools. So they needed to explain why that made sense. There's really no way to explain why it made sense to keep them closed in the first place, but they had to be able to say, something's happened. In the last, 9 days, something has happened, and the schools, while not safe, last week, they'll be okay next week. It's kind of a steep hill to climb, really, partly because when they closed them, they didn't really offer a tremendous rationale. You remember that was a press conference where Doug Ford talked about, 100, maybe 200,000 cases a day were coming. 1,000, 2,000 people a day going into the hospital, a tsunami. So, we had to do everything possible to avoid the tsunami. Mm-hmm. Well, since then, case numbers have come down, although with the way they test now, it's hard to know what's happening broadly because they're only testing people in healthcare, high-risk settings and so forth. But, looking at the same high-risk group over the last week, the numbers have come down. They're still high. Certainly haven't seen the tsunami. So challenge is, how do we make sense out of this, if you're Lecce and Moore, without saying, the Premier was kind of crazy last week when he closed schools, but don't worry, the open schools forces are now in charge. So they did offer a number of arguments and things that have changed, and it's not completely inconsequential.
Okay. So at the conclusion of the news conference, if you're giving them a grade, I guess, in the education theme, how do you think they did?
I give them a B+, I think.
B+, okay, all right.
Lecce speaks very well. He's quite persuasive. He did mention and underline a number of things, new things they've done, N95 masks for teachers, 3-ply for students, rapid antigen tests for kids to take home so the parents can test them if they think there's an issue, vaccination clinics and schools, a little more weak, 3,000 additional HEPA filters. Okay, are they in schools yet? They've been shipped. All right. Okay, they're not in schools yet, so maybe you shouldn't talk about them too much. But the teachers have made a big deal out of this a couple of weeks ago. They're promising 3,000 filters. That's nothing. Terrible. So, well, okay, but there's already 70,000 in place. And every school in the province has been assessed, and 99% of them have had ventilation upgrades. So it's not like nothing is being done. It kind of goes back to the point that were schools safe last week? Probably.
Okay. So a B+ is not an A.
No.
My parents would say, well, why is it only a B+? So the...
Oh, come on, Rob. This is tremendous. This is the best mark you've ever had.
Yeah. So there must have been some weak points. What were they?
Oh, there were a couple of things, I think, that jumped out. One was Dr. Moore was asked by a journalist, well, what about mandating the vaccine?
Yes.
Well, it's a new vaccine. I'd like to see more before we mandate. Nobody's mandated. Now, earlier in the same press conference, he enthusiastically supported vaccines and the benefits outweigh the risks.
Yeah, again, let's play that clip. We have that soundbite here. Let's play that. He's asked, why isn't it mandatory for children to get the COVID-19 vaccine?
So it is a new vaccine, and as a result of that, we want a greater experience with it before we'd ever mandate it.
We want greater experience with it. Okay. All right. Okay.
But hey, you little guinea pigs, line up. It just didn't strike the right note, and it didn't take people long to jump on it, and rightly so, I think. It wasn't much of a sales pitch, and later in the day, the government issued a clarifying statement from Dr. Moore in which he once again praised the virtues of vaccination and so forth, which he had said in the press conference, and which would be his usual line. But that was a little disconcerting. And the other thing that people are having a hard time wrapping their heads around is the change in testing in schools and the change in reporting. It used to be that more accurate PCR tests were available to kids and teachers in schools, so we had that kind of reporting. Okay, we've got an outbreak in this school, we're doing this, we're doing that. It was quite visible.
Yeah.
And now those tests are reserved for other people, so all they have is a rapid antigen test, which they don't track and record. So what they come up with as a proxy is absenteeism. So there's a lot of absenteeism in the school. It doesn't mean that they've all got Omicron, but probably they do, or a lot of them do, so that's the point to report. Okay, well, what's the threshold? Well, when 30% of people, students and teachers, are absent, then the schools will report to the public health unit, they'll report out to the parents and the public and so forth. Like 30%, that seems like a lot. It's a high number. I think people would be expecting to know that sooner, like maybe 10%, but not 30. And I think all this is designed to keep schools open. We're getting away from, oh my goodness, 2 kids in your cohort have tested positive, shut everything down. It's just they're going to keep on moving forward with this. Teachers are sick. We're building up a supply of retired teachers and other people who can step in. So it's the right thing to do in terms of keeping schools open and not overreacting. But people are used to something different, and now it will sound like underreacting.
Okay. So, David, let's play the clip again here of the Premier when he was asked about the vaccine tax, the anti-vax tax that they're proposing, or at least floating the idea of in Quebec from Mr. Legault. Doug Ford was asked about that yesterday. This is what he said.
We're taking a different approach. We aren't going down that road. We're going to take a different approach. But I implore, I ask, I beg every single person that's not vaccinated, please protect yourself, protect your family, protect coworkers. Please get your vaccination. That's the best way we can defend against Omicron or any of the variants.
So a lot of premiers have been asked about this in light of what Mr. Legault is doing. That's what Mr. Ford said. Mr. Moe said, I'm not going to do it. Mr. Kenney said he's not going to do it either. So there aren't a lot of takers. Mr. Trudeau refused to say really anything about it yesterday other than I want to see more details. But generally speaking, when it comes to say punishing the unvaccinated, what do you think about the job Doug Ford is doing here in going after the unvaccinated or restricting them or whatever the case might be?
Yeah, well, it's not so effective now because the vaccine passport is essentially useless because there's nowhere you can go with it anymore. And really, people who are even triple vaccinated have no particular extra privileges at the moment. So I don't know that there's any point in this whole discussion of trying to punish the unvaccinated and, force them so we can get, 2, 3, 4 more % vaccinated. Because we knew when we started this that we never get beyond 90. We're very close to it. There was always going to be a group of people who, for, whatever reasons, weren't going to be vaccinated. So it's not a surprise, and to try to blame everything that's happening now on the unvaccinated is irrational, in my opinion, because most of the people in the hospital are people who've been vaccinated. Now, it's right to say that the percentage of unvaccinated people who get sick is significantly higher. But, of course, there's a lot more people who are vaccinated. So we'd have a problem, even if it was 100% vaccination. Vaccinated people are transmitting this disease to other people. So it's not like vaccinated people are getting a huge payback for being vaccinated. I mean, the payback is significant in the sense that, you're less likely to get sick and die. That's kind of a big deal. But there would still be high case numbers. There'd still be a lot of hospital demand. It would be somewhat lower. There's no doubt about that. But how far are we prepared to go in pushing people to get what's really a small gain on the margin, especially when we're being told in Ontario that, hey, this thing should peak at the end of January. So say Mr. Unvaccinated said, yeah, I'm gonna go out right now and get vaccinated, get my first dose, limited protection. Okay, well, it takes 2 weeks for that to be effective.
Right.
He's really on board now. He's going to get his second dose. That won't be effective until after, they think the peak of all this will have gone by. So whatever we have now, we have, and we have to ride it out. I think we're just distracting ourselves by picking on the unvaccinated and trying to pretend that it was all their fault. If we were all catching it from the unvaccinated, that might be an argument, but we're not.
Thank you for this morning, Randall Denley. Always great to hear from you. We'll speak next week.
This program is brought to you by Ignite TV. Now you're in command. Visit Rogers.com for more details.
Call the Rogers TV viewer response line. Email us or connect with us on social media.